Talking to Heaven, a medium's message of life after death, abridged by James Van Praagh, read by Vincent Bagnall. Writing this book was an undertaking that could not possibly have been executed alone. It was created by the blending of thoughts, ideas, experiences, and lives of those who have dearly touched me. I first must give appreciation to the creative expression, identified under various titles such as God, Allah, Yahweh, Divine Being, and the Great Light. I will just refer to this power as the source of all. I'd like to acknowledge those beloved souls on this earth's plane who have come to me with stories of both tragedy and love, seeking guidance, closure, healing, and peace. I hope I have fulfilled their expectations and have been able to place their minds and hearts to rest. I thank and appreciate all those dear ones in the spirit world who, like dreams, come back through me to relay earthly experiences to their families and friends. These remembrances, now woven into the tapestry of time, will provide evidence and comfort, proving that there is no death, only life. Through the power of love and only love, these heart-strung spirits align themselves with us, providing courage, strength, power, and guidance, and assisting us in fulfilling our individual earthly destinies. The medium. I am often asked if I was born a medium, or if I was transformed into one by a terrible illness or a freak accident that caused some sort of head trauma or a near-death experience. As hair-raising as those possibilities may be, I cannot claim any one of them as the dramatic moment that introduced me to my life's work. I'm not unlike anyone else. We're all born with some level of psychic ability. The question is, do we recognize our psychic abilities and act upon them? Like many others, I didn't know what it meant to have psychic ability. It was probably on some TV game show that I first heard the term psychic. I was lucky enough to pronounce it, let alone understand its definition. It was a word that came closest to explaining why I knew things about people when they walked into a room. It was also the reason my first grade Catholic school teacher kept me after school one day. Lunch break was over, and all the kids were heading back to the classroom. I just put away my Yogi Bear lunchbox when my teacher, Mrs. Weinlich, walked into the room. Our eyes met, and a feeling of sadness instantly came over me. Then I walked up to her and said, "Everything is going to be all right. John broke his leg." She looked at me with a cross expression and said, "What are you talking about?" I replied, "John was hit by a car, but he is okay. He just broke his leg." Well, I thought her eyes were going to pop straight out of her head. She pointed to my seat and told me to sit in it for the rest of the day. About an hour later, the principal came to the door and spoke with Mrs. Weinlich. Suddenly, Mrs. Weinlich panicked, turned white, and ran out of the room screaming. The next day, Mrs. Weinlich seemed to be back to her normal self, except that she did not stop staring at me the whole day. She asked me to stay after school so she could talk to me. God bless her. It was her talk that introduced me to my psychic ability. It seemed that on the previous day, her son John was hit by a car, but miraculously, he had just broken his leg. She asked me, "How did you know it was going to happen?" I didn't know how to answer her. I just knew it. I had a sense about it. She stared at me and I started to cry. Was I responsible for creating this accident and maiming her son? Well, needless to say, she calmed down and told me not to get upset. Many children and grown-up people know things before they happen, noted Mrs. Weinlich. She said that I was one of God's messengers and that God had given me a special gift. She continued, so that one day you could help people. She told me not to ever feel bad about things I might see in my mind. You are special, she said, but she warned me to be careful with whom I share my specialness. This was my first explanation of my psychic ability. When I look back on that time, I'm grateful to Mrs. Weinlich for explaining it to me. It was an aid to me in so many ways. If I had had a nun for my homeroom teacher instead of a layperson, my life might have turned out a lot differently. Today, I fully understand my ability to see and feel things that are not of this physical world. Often referred to as a sixth sense, psychic ability is also known as intuition, gut feeling, a hunch, or a certain knowingness one has about something. And all of us use this ability every day without even knowing it. For instance, how many times have you thought of someone, and minutes later the phone rings, and that person is on the other end of the line? Or you get a hunch to switch lanes in traffic, and you find out further along the way that there was an accident in the other lane. Perhaps you get a feeling on the way to work that the boss is going to be in a bad mood, and sure enough, you get to work and it's true. How many times have you been thinking of a song, and minutes later you hear it on the radio? These are all examples of psychic ability. Where does this sixth sense come from? In Greek, the word psychic means of the soul. When we use our psychic ability, we are turning into the energy of the soul, or the natural life force that permeates every living creature. As infants, we are even more psychic than we are as adults. Maybe not more psychic, but more open to our psychic senses. Not only because we are still very close to the other side of life, but also because our speech and thoughts are not developed, so we have to rely on our feelings or our sensing to relate to the physical world. We have all seen a baby start to cry when held by one person and stop immediately when held by another. The baby surely senses a more harmonious or safer vibration with the second individual. That is why babies always want their mothers. A strong psychic link exists between a mother and her baby. How often will a mother run into the baby's room, knowing she is needed just as her baby wakes up? This link continues to grow stronger and stronger, and soon a mother just senses her baby's needs without any verbal signs from the child at all. Psychic energy is also at work in the plant and animal kingdoms. Plants are extremely sensitive and often thrive very nicely when they sense a gentle and friendly environment in which they are cared for and feel loved. This reminds me of a very interesting story. When I was working a regular 9-to-5 job, I drove a coworker home one day. As I sat in her apartment, I heard a very high-pitched sound, and this screaming vibration was all around me. It was as if someone was hurt and crying for help. I looked around and finally realized what it was. All of the plants in her apartment were dried up and dying. They were screaming for water. I immediately told a woman, and she informed me that she hadn't watered them for over 2 weeks. The idea of plants screaming might seem strange to many. To those, I suggest reading books on the subject, especially one called The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins. We must realize that the magic of life comes in all forms, shapes, and sizes, even plants. We can learn more about these life forms if we take the time to listen and open up to our own psychic ability and to the energies all around us. Besides the plant kingdom, animals are known to rely on a sixth sense. Witness the behavior of your own Fido or kitty. How often have you seen a dog cower or bark relentlessly when it meets a certain individual? Or how it tends to stick around one person more than another while roaming around a room full of people, or during natural disasters such as earthquakes, tornadoes, or hurricanes. An animal tends to become restless and disoriented and often hides in a closet or underneath furniture. The animal's not getting the news from the TV set, like us. It just knows. Usually, animals sense a disaster before it strikes. They're highly sensitive to human anxiety as well. If you want to know a weather forecast, observe the nearby cattle. Before a storm, cows can often be found lying down on the grass. Throughout creation, animals have depended on their psychic sense or instinct to assist them in protecting themselves and sustaining life. I want to see God for myself. Even before I thought about my psychic ability, I used to think a lot about the existence of God. Although I was raised Catholic and attended 9 years of Catholic school, I found the Catholic view of God to be too limited and unrealistic. We had to believe in a deity on blind faith, and that confused me all the more. I was plagued with questions like, how do we know God really exists? Has anyone ever seen God? How does God make things from nothing? Who wrote the stories in the Bible? And are they true? As much as I wanted to believe in the God molded by the rituals and laws of the church, I did not feel a personal experience of God inside me. Was it my duty simply to live out this daily ceremony? I felt I was missing a piece of the puzzle. Had the nuns kept something from me? Did I miss something at Mass that everyone else had picked up on? Was I the only one to question their beliefs? The request seemed simple enough in my young mind. If there is a God, please, show me proof. My prayer was answered when I was 8 years old. I was lying in bed early one morning when I felt a strong gust of cold wind blow across my face. I pulled the blankets closer to me and looked over to my bedroom window. It was tightly shut. As I tried to figure out how that gust of wind got in my room, I looked up and I saw a large hand, palm down, coming from the ceiling. The hand glowed with a pulsating white light. I was mesmerized, but somehow unafraid. I didn't understand what was happening, but perhaps because I was a child, I had no fear. I was willing to accept the image I was seeing as real. I was suddenly filled with an overwhelming sense of peace, love, and joy. Although there was no booming voice of God, as often described in the Bible, to answer my questions or reveal my destiny, I knew that this vision was God. I also knew that I would do whatever was necessary to experience that joyful feeling again. I began to understand that there was much more to life than what I had been taught and what I could see through my physical eyes. The illuminated hand of God was my first clairvoyant experience, and though the impact was impressive, I never mentioned it to anyone. I felt it was my secret, and that no one would believe me anyway. Later, I would learn much more about clairvoyance. When the mind is impressed with various images, shapes, scenes, spirits, faces, and remote locations not visible to the physical eye. For example, before falling asleep at night, a number of different forms, faces, and scenarios are seen or played out in our mind's eye. Clairvoyance is similar to seeing these pictures in our mind. A séance early one Saturday evening. After the startling demonstration of the hand, I was convinced of the existence of God. After all, only God could manifest out of thin air. However, a whole new set of questions popped into my mind. I became fascinated with the concept of death and what happens after we die. I found myself asking what-if questions about heaven and life after death. Is there a place where we go after we die? Is there really a heaven or hell, or a place in between? Is life infinite? All I knew is what I had been taught in Catholic school, and that was too one-sided. What do other people believe about God and life after death? I wanted to understand. I wanted to know more. I wanted to investigate further. Little did I know that a supernatural adventure would come soon. Scott and I were best friends. We played ball and did all the other routine kid stuff together. We also experimented with the usual paranormal games that seemed to be part of growing up for most kids. We would jokingly ask questions of the magic 8-ball, but our grins would soon fade when answers such as "reply haze, ask again later" turned up. How could it really know? We contacted spirits on a Ouija board, though each of us secretly believed it was the other one pushing the planchette. So it seemed only natural that one Saturday morning we decided to have a séance at 7 o'clock that evening. 7 was about as close to the witching hour as any 12-year-olds were going to get. I remember that day vividly. It seemed to drag on forever. Visions of every Vincent Price movie I had ever seen flashed through my mind. Somehow I knew this night was going to be special. Something big was going to occur. By 6:45, I was too anxious to wait any longer. 2 hours earlier, I found a white candle and stuffed it in my pocket. I thought we would need it to conduct a proper séance. I raced to Scott's house in record time. With a quick hello to his parents, I hurried off with Scott to the den. I handed Scott the candle. He lit it and solemnly placed it in the center of an ashtray on a table positioned between us. We closed the windows, turned off the lights, sat facing each other, and waited. We both felt a little nervous, even though we told ourselves it was all just a gag. The atmosphere was appropriately spooky. The candle created strange shadows around the room, outlining our faces with an eerie glow. The best part of this game was to see who got scared and ran first. We sat in silence for 30 minutes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "What's next?" I asked impatiently. Scott shrugged his shoulders. "Maybe we should ask to speak to someone." It was the 1-year anniversary of the death of Janis Joplin, so Scott suggested we call her. We chanted our call to Janis for about 10 minutes. We waited. Nothing happened. We called Janis again. The candle flame remained still. There were no mysterious knocks on the table. No cold wind passed through the room. We waited some more. Our eyes constantly darted around the room, looking for any movement, any sign that Janis had arrived. But alas, we were two 12-year-olds getting bored. I decided to try one last request. "Janis, if you're in the room, give us a sign with the candle," I commanded in my deepest, most melodramatic voice. The candle flickered slightly. Suddenly, the flame leaned to the left and held there for a second. Then it moved to the right and stayed there. Scott and I sat frozen in place. The flame began to move frantically from left to right and back again. Neither of us could breathe. Whatever moved the candle flame, it certainly was not us. We were too petrified to try anything. Suddenly the candle went out, and the room was plunged into total darkness. In a fit of bravery, we both went screaming from the room to the safety of Scott's parents. Did we contact Janis Joplin? Who knows? I do believe we opened a door to something, or someone, apart from the physical world. However, I do find it ironic that what started out as a gag between two kids was a somewhat entertaining induction into what has become my career. Other psychic phenomena. As I recall other events in my childhood, I had many peculiar and otherworldly experiences. I guess you could say that the séance experience was the most dramatic in a macabre sort of way. It was only one of several such experiences that I now know were definite precursors to a life intertwined with spiritualism, suspense, and mystery. The credo of my life has always been, the unknown is something not yet found. It was a part of my nature to seek out the unexplainable and find answers. Therefore, my curiosity would often take me to places where angels fear to tread. As a child, I often found a variety of games, subjects, and distractions to assist in my validation of and fascination with the occult world. A couple of my most cherished attractions were haunted houses and graveyards. Just the idea that a house supposedly contained unseen living forms roaming the hallways totally intrigued me. The natural detective in me would often take over, and I could not rest until I solved the mystery that was before me. The Bell House was just such a mystery. A menacing structure. It was masked in chipped antique gray paint, its worn-out shutters barely clinging to their hinges. Some were half-closed over yellow-tinted windows. Bell House lived in a century that was far forgotten, when horse and buggy ruled the streets and livestock grazed lazily on the land. The house, or manor, as it was known, was an ominous sight, as it stood hidden beneath overgrown trees far from the street's pavement. To my childish eyes, it appeared as though its spires stretched straight up into the stratosphere of heaven. Bell House had been abandoned for over 50 years, but had remained a daunting landmark on my way to and from school. I remember how we would run by it as fast as possible because of the stories that had evolved about it. There was the one about an old, white-haired lady whose unrelenting wails were heard throughout the house. As the story went, this lady had a son who was a sea merchant. After many idle months of not working, she insisted he go on an expedition. The son begrudgingly went, and was never seen again. It seemed there was a sudden change in the weather, and the ship on which the son sailed was destroyed in a huge storm. No one survived. His mother never accepted this explanation, and thought her son ran away. From then on, she would often be seen roaming the rooms of the house, looking for her boy, and howling in sorrow throughout the night. Occasionally, she would leave a candle burning, hoping her son would see it and be guided home. But that was not the worst part. All of us kids knew that if we just happened to look at the house and laid our eyes on the lady's face, she would come to our bedroom at night while we were sleeping and take us back to her house to live with her forever. My friends and I never forgot that story of Bell House, and even if it wasn't true, it certainly added a bit of excitement to our otherwise dreary walk to and from school. As I got a little older, probably around the age of 10 or 11, I pretty much discarded the harmless yarn about the old lady and her son, but I still found myself extremely fascinated with the house. I would stop in front of it and look up at the second-floor window, hoping to catch a glimmer of a burning candle or hear the soft whispers of a mumbled cry. There was definitely something in that house. I knew it. It seemed to be calling out to me, and I had to answer its call. One day, I did. My would-be mystical accomplice, Scott, and a couple of other brave souls from the neighborhood decided to follow my lead. Somehow, we had to find a way into the house. We decided the best way to gain access was through the back, which was practically buried under the trees. There was no fence to keep us out, so the job was easier than we first thought. After making it through the trees, our eyes fixed themselves on a decrepit, worn-out wooden house. The fortress that was once the object of so many frightful and horrendous tales appeared to be nothing more than a pile of frayed wood and outdated cement. As luck would have it, there was a window alongside the back door. As one of the guys kept watch, the rest of us pulled a board off the window. A stream of sunshine touched a century of darkness. We carefully crawled into the house, which from the looks of it had barely made it through time. I instantly felt chills as I stood in the room. But my preconceived sense of dread and fright turned out to be feelings of joy and laughter. As I looked around, I saw what resembled a huge living room, much longer than wide. My friends and I never forgot that story of Bell House, and even if it wasn't true, it certainly added a bit of excitement to our otherwise dreary walk to and from school. As I got a little older, probably around the age of 10 or 11, I pretty much discarded the harmless yarn about the old lady and her son, but I still found myself extremely fascinated with the house. I would stop in front of it and look up at the second-floor window, hoping to catch a glimmer of a burning candle or hear the soft whispers of a mumbled cry. There was definitely something in that house. I knew it. It seemed to be calling out to me, and I had to answer its call. One day, I did. My would-be mystical accomplice, Scott, and a couple of other brave souls from the neighborhood decided to follow my lead. Somehow we had to find a way into the house. We decided the best way to gain access was through the back, which was practically buried under the trees. There was no fence to keep us out, so the job was easier than we first thought. After making it through the trees, our eyes fixed themselves on a decrepit, worn-out wooden house. The fortress that was once the object of so many frightful and horrendous tales appeared to be nothing more than a pile of frayed wood and outdated cement. As luck would have it, there was a window alongside the back door. As one of the guys kept watch, the rest of us pulled a board off the window. A stream of sunshine touched a century of darkness. We carefully crawled into the house, which from the looks of it had barely made it through time. I instantly felt chills as I stood in the room, but my preconceived sense of dread and fright turned out to be feelings of joy and laughter. As I looked around, I saw what resembled a huge living room, much longer than wide. The walls were stained in yesterday's rain, and molted pink wallpaper hung torn and tattered. There were huge gaping holes in parts of the walls that covered over wooden slats. As I walked through the room, I had a strange feeling that this was a place where dinner dances were held. I could almost see the people waltzing by. In one corner of the large room, I imagined a small band playing for the guests until the wee hours of the morning. I continued to walk straight through to an attached room on the far side. More than likely it was a dining room, large enough to accommodate a good-sized crowd. I could see a banquet table full of the finest foods. Upon the table were candlelight chandeliers illuminating the evening's fare. Suddenly, I was snapped out of my reverie by the sound of my friend Kevin's scream. "Holy cow! Look at this stuff!" he hollered. When I joined Kevin and the rest of the guys in the other room, I saw what made him so excited. Strewn across the floor were various books and photographs in all shapes and sizes. Many of the books were on merchandising, trade, and seamanship. Several others were accounting ledgers containing penciled-in figures. As we simultaneously noticed the books on shipping and boating, all of our faces turned white. Together we turned toward the door, searching for our nearest means of escape. All at once, we vividly remembered the early childhood tales about the merchant son and his mother. Was it true, after all? We shuddered to think what might happen to us. What if the place was haunted and ghosts were lurking in the hallways? I don't know if it was a guy thing, but no one was about to show how scared he was, even though I knew we were all shaking in our shoes. We decided to stay close together and further investigate our surroundings. I picked up a couple of pictures from the floor and looked at them. They were pictures of children. One was a baby and the other was of two boys neatly dressed. Their resemblance clearly marked them as brothers. As I held the picture, I felt a sense that someone was standing behind me. You know that feeling when you think someone is walking behind you? It felt exactly like that. Frightened, I immediately dropped the picture. It was the white-haired lady coming to capture me. Slowly I turned my head to look behind me and saw nothing. It must be my imagination. Then the oddest thing happened. I suddenly had a thought to walk to the corner of the room and pick up the photograph closest to the wall. So I walked over, bent down, and picked up the picture. Staring back at me in the framed photograph was a glamorous-looking lady wearing a long, dark dress and holding a beautiful bouquet. She had an incredible sweet face with deep-set eyes that seemed to look right through me. Her hair was tied in a bun, held taut with a ribbon. As I held the picture close to me, I got a feeling that this was the mother of the children in the two photos. I can't describe how I knew exactly, but I just did. I looked down and saw a picture of a mustached man, his arms folded and his eyes staring straight ahead. I picked that one up as well. As I held on to his picture, I knew that he was the lady's husband. I had this feeling that they were a family who entertained frequently. They would have been a very wealthy and influential family in the area. As I looked at other family pictures, I gathered that they had some kind of tie to politics. I could not explain my feelings to my friends, and they all thought I was crazy or had a pretty vivid imagination. But I knew there was a force of some kind pushing me toward that corner of the room. What was it? Who was it? Why did I know this family in particular enjoyed entertaining, or that they meddled in politics? Was I being told by the ghosts who still walked the halls? Was the childhood tale of a white-haired lady and her merchant son true? I found out the answers to all my inquiries 3 years later. I'll never forget it. I was at home, and the mail had just arrived. There was a booklet from the Bayside Historical Society entitled Bayside, Yesterday and Today. It described how the town was first inhabited by various Indian tribes, then Dutch, and ultimately English merchants. It wasn't until I got to the part about the Bell House that my interest was aroused. Abraham Bell, a wealthy shipping merchant, had purchased 300 acres of land on which he built a manor for his family in 1849. His family was rather large and included 2 sons very close in age. It was one of the first settlements in Bayside. I read further. The Bells were part of the elite, or high society, and they often enjoyed entertaining civil officials from New York City and various politicians from Washington, D.C. Fascinated, I continued reading. As I turned the next page, my eyes grew wide. Staring back from the page were photos of Mr. and Mrs. Bell, the exact same photos I held in my hand 3 years earlier. They were confirmation of my feelings on that eventful visit. My other mystifying experiences all occurred around the same age, when I was 10 or 11. During lunch break, a bunch of us would get bored and want to do something different instead of playing kickball or jump rope with the girls. Some of the cooler guys would go into town and see how many things they could steal from the local five and dime without getting caught. When they returned to school in the afternoon, they would proudly display their haul, usually pens, rulers, and markers. Great extracurricular activity for Catholic school students. Anyway, since I was neither cool nor a thief, I did what I thought was cool. A bunch of us would go to the Lawrence Cemetery. This family-owned cemetery was established in the early 1800s. It has since become an historical landmark. On one particular lunch jaunt to the cemetery, I had a very interesting and intriguing experience. 2 of my schoolmates and I were sitting under a tree finishing our lunch. We were thoroughly enjoying the sunny, warm spring day in the serenity of the cemetery and contemplated the idea of cutting school the rest of the day. As we debated back and forth, we suddenly heard 2 kids laughing not too far from us. We all looked toward the giggles, but we didn't see anything. We rationalized that it was probably some kids in a backyard nearby and their voices had traveled. Well, after we were comfortable with that explanation, the laughter started again. We all felt very weird and a little scared. We decided to investigate the source of the laughter. As we walked toward the area, once again, we heard children laughing. We still could not see anything, and reluctantly we continued to walk. As we got closer, my buddy Peter yelled out, "Look!" We saw 2 little kids, a boy and a girl, who resembled each other. They looked about 5 and 6 years old. As we approached them, they ran off, and we could not find them anywhere. This is the weird part. We had visited the cemetery many times and had hardly seen anyone there, never any young kids. We figured we'd better get back to school. As we turned to leave, my friend Tim screamed, "Look at this!" He was staring at something. It was a tombstone with the names of 2 children, a sister and a brother, who died at ages 4 and 5. Was it an apparition? I honestly can't say, but my friends never wanted to talk about it again. These experiences might have foretold my future if I was able to understand them at the time, but as an otherwise normal kid, I was more interested in pursuing the likes of Little League, baseball cards, and stoop ball, growing up in Catholic school. Between stints of amusing myself with haunted houses and cemeteries, I attended Sacred Heart Catholic School. Like many children my age, I never fully understood the concept of God. I thought God was a nice man with a beard who loved us. But if we did something wrong, he would hate us, and we would burn in hell as punishment. A bit scary to a small child, don't you think? I remember times when I sat in church and looked up at the mural above the altar. It was a beautiful, pristine picture of Jesus smiling down upon the world. I remember thinking, how could someone like this make you burn in hell? Another thing we were taught was that if we said prayers, God would hear them and answer them. Well, I don't even remember any of my prayers being answered. I couldn't understand this concept at all. As a child, I would constantly ask questions about God, but they were seldom answered. When they were, the answers did not satisfy the original questions, and instead produced more questions. For instance, the nuns at school dressed in black habits, accentuated with a white wimple. The first time I laid my eyes on the nuns in those habits, I was frightened to go to school. Those women did not look like my picture of the wives of God, especially dressed in all black. When I asked, "Why do you wear black?" they had no reply. From an early age, I had an awareness of heaven. Although I envisioned heaven with its pearly gates, winged angels, and so forth, I also knew it was more than that. I knew that when we went to heaven, we would see all of our friends and family who died before us. The nuns agreed that we would meet our loved ones in heaven, but they explained them away as souls. I never understood what a soul was. I knew people lived in heaven, but if people lived in heaven, where were their souls? Was their soul a part of them? Again, such questions baffled the nuns. Unfortunately, their standard reply was to be quiet and don't ask so many questions. To which they added, "One day you'll find out where these souls go, and then you'll wish you hadn't asked such a question." I guess they meant that I would find out when I died. I remember an incident in second grade that made me question God even more. I didn't have the right colored pencil for a lesson, so Sister Matilda slapped me so hard that I went flying to the floor and lost a moment of consciousness. When I sat back in my seat, she was already on the other side of the room. It was obvious that she had little concern for my welfare. I was only 7 years old at the time. I remembered thinking, why did she hit me? I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't do anything bad. How could someone who talks about loving one another, someone who is married to God, treat me this way? So, from a very young age, my faith and trust in the Catholic school soon became a delicate balance between what was preached and what was demonstrated. I remained dubious. I stayed in Catholic school because of my strong Irish Catholic mother. She attended Mass every day and insisted it was the only way to heaven. When I asked her about other religions, she just referred to them as those heathens. According to the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith is the one true religion. I didn't want to be a heathen or burn in hell, so I remained at Sacred Heart. But I felt skeptical of those big ladies who looked a lot like penguins. In hindsight, I can understand why the nuns were so abusive to children, and why some, not all, of the priests became alcoholics, child molesters, or had affairs. I believe it is very difficult and somewhat inhuman to live in a state of grace all the time. Please, we are only human. There are, of course, some who are able to live such an austere lifestyle, and all the better for them. For the majority, however, it must be impossible. No wonder there has been an enormous drop in enrollment in seminaries and novitiates. The Catholic Church has an extremely archaic belief system. In many ways, it has the mindset of the 15th century. Life is ever changing and evolving. What was true for our ancestors may no longer apply to us. We continually grow and expand as beings on the earth. Instead of labeling each other according to religious beliefs, we need to see each other as one and the same. I am not saying religion is a bad thing. Quite the contrary. If most of us practiced the ideals of the religions we follow, this world would certainly be a much happier place to live. No one would be gunned down on a neighborhood street or killed in a war. No one would go hungry or be homeless. Unfortunately, I believe the leaders of religions are more interested in gaining power here on earth than preparing their flocks for salvation. Seminary life was not for me. After 8 years at Sacred Heart Grade School, I attended Amard Preparatory Seminary in Hyde Park, New York. Becoming a priest was my mother's idea, not mine, but I had always wanted to get away from my hometown, and I saw this opportunity as my chance. It was the first time I had been away from home, and I was homesick. Moreover, I felt abandoned. I was 14 years old and very depressed. Fortunately for me, I discovered that many of the other boys were going through a similar emotional adjustment. If there is one thing the Catholic Church teaches well, it is that common suffering is a great unifier. Eventually, we all got used to it. In the seminary, I returned once again to an orderly and disciplined environment. Being sensitive, I often picked up frustrations from the priests and brothers. I felt that most of them would have preferred a secular lifestyle, but for whatever reason, they gave their lives to God. When I was a seminary student, I too wanted to give my life over to God, but I did not want to become a priest or brother because the lifestyle was too confining. I also felt unsure about the ideas expressed in Mass as being the absolute truth. Besides, as in grammar school, I was not satisfied that my religion was entirely about God. There seemed to be too many rules and regulations, and not enough demonstration of the Word of God in the world. The only consistent act was the collection of monetary offerings. In my first year at the seminary, I often thought about my questions concerning God. I always kept such thoughts to myself because I was afraid everyone would think I was nuts. Often while sitting through Mass, I would meditate on the idea, who or what is God? When I did, the experience of the outstretched hand surrounded in light came to mind. I thought, was it the same hand that brought me through Catholic school? Was it the same hand that steered me to the seminary? The more I questioned, the more unsure I felt about my religion. Why weren't these questions being answered? It wouldn't be too much longer before I finally found out. It happened during Easter week, and specifically on Good Friday. All the artifacts on the altar had been removed, and any remaining statues, crosses, and the like had been covered with cloth. The monstrance had been placed at a side altar. A monstrance is a very tall, gold, ornate cross that contains the consecrated hosts or wafers that represent the body of Christ. All the students took turns meditating in front of the monstrance, and we had no set prayers, so we relied totally on what we felt. Each student knelt or sat for 30 minutes at a time during the entire weekend. When I sat there on Good Friday, it was probably the first time I felt a sense of God since the experience of the hand. I sat in that small room, staring at this incredible gold piece of art adorned in flowers. I kept staring at it, and after 20 minutes, I became aware that God was inside the room. Not a literal figure standing beside me, but a feeling of peace and tranquility inside me. It was the exact feeling I had when I was 8 years of age. Once again, I felt it was the proof for which I was searching, the proof that God was alive. I knew it wasn't the host in front of me. It was much greater than that. It was inside me. It spoke in my heart, not words, but feelings of an incredible love that God had for me and of which I was a part. I understood then that this feeling of God was not just to be found in a seminary or church, but everywhere and in everything. God is unlimited. I finally had an answer and knew this was the reason why I was in the seminary. I had to take this sense of God with me, and from that day on, I never questioned the existence of God. I just had to look in my own heart to see God. After that experience, I never felt obligated to finish seminary. I knew there was nothing left to learn there, for if the teachers meant to prepare me to understand the presence of God, then they succeeded. I realized that God was a part of me and all that I do. God was love and non-judgment, understanding and compromise, justice and honesty. I realized that we all had God inside ourselves. Communication with the other side. I left the seminary after my first year. I spent the next 3 years in a New York City public high school. I moved out of the house once again when I entered San Francisco State College to major in broadcasting. I dreamed of a career as a screenwriter. As luck would have it, while coordinating a conference with the creative staff of Hill Street Blues, I became friendly with one of the show's producers. When I told him I would be graduating soon, he offered what I thought was my first big break. I'll never forget those magic words. "Call me when you get to L.A. We can probably put you on the show as a production assistant." A production assistant. Suddenly, my life was on a roll. After graduation, I wasted little time when I returned to New York. I bought a car, packed my gear, and headed west. I rolled into Los Angeles on July 7th, 1982. At last, I was in the major leagues. I made it to Hollywood. I vowed that I would not leave Tinseltown until I realized my dream and became a writer. I called my friend, the producer, to let him know I was ready to begin my new life. He was not available. I survived as a temp until I worked my way full-time into the basement of the William Morris Agency. I had the glamorous responsibility of pulling staples out of files that were being prepared for microfiche. I spent most of the time daydreaming about being a famous screenwriter and living the glamorous life. Even though my present situation was not my dream job, I had the strangest sensation in the pit of my stomach that it was important for me to stay where I was. Very soon, I knew why. One day, my supervisor, Carol Shoemaker, and I were discussing metaphysics. She had an appointment to see a medium named Brian Hurst. "Do you want to come with me?" she asked. I had no idea what a medium was, but I jumped at the chance to leave the mailroom and discover something new. We arrived in Manhattan Beach a few minutes before our 7 o'clock appointment time. Maybe 7 was the witching hour after all. I felt a little nervous about the whole thing. My mind kept skipping back to the séance with Scott and Janice. I started to wonder if contacting the dead was such a good idea. I was not calmed by the smiling Englishman with the large green eyes who met us at the door. When he introduced himself, I thought he seemed a little too pleasant for his line of work. As we walked into his home, my mind raced double time, conjuring up images of demons that this sorcerer might unleash. Nonetheless, Carol and I settled into a comfortable spot on the bright orange couch. Were we ready for the ride? I wasn't so sure. Brian spent the next half hour describing what we were going to experience. He explained that he was clairaudient. He was literally able to hear spirit voices in his ear. He said, "The spirit people are on a very fast vibration. They speak very quickly. Sometimes it sounds like Morse code. I get pieces of information like blips and bleeps." Upon ending this explanation, he told Carol that her father was standing in the corner of the room. "He looks like he injured his finger." Carol responded that her father had cut his finger right before he died. I was flabbergasted. How did he know this? I sat at the edge of my seat and waited to hear more. Brian continued to talk about Carol's father. There were no moving candles or tapping tables, however. 20 minutes later, Brian turned to me. He said that there was another James in spirit who gave me his love and had an interest in my life. I had no idea to whom he was referring. Later I learned that I did have an Uncle James who had died some years back. Near the end of the session, Brian said, "You know, James, you are very mediumistic. The spirit people are telling me that one day you will give readings like this to other people. The spirits are planning to use you." I wasn't sure how to respond to this pronouncement. After all, my goals were in a completely different direction. I wasn't ready for my life to take a 180-degree turn. With some nervousness, I replied, "I have enough trouble understanding the living. Why would I want to start talking to the dead?" Brian simply smiled and calmly assured me, "One day you will." The exploration of my own psychic powers. For months after our session, Brian's prediction haunted me. At that time, he continued to explain that not everyone was able to raise their vibration to a level that would allow for direct communication with those in spirit. Fortunately for you, James, you would be able to make such an adjustment. I was fascinated by Brian's contact with the spirit world and curious about his assessment of my ability to do the same thing. The curiosity from my childhood charged to the forefront. Why me? What had I done to qualify for this? In my heart, I knew that this was to be my future life, and all my experiences were preparing me for this turn of events. However, my head could not reconcile such an outlandish prospect. After all, it was not exactly the life I had planned. What about my writing career? Isn't that the reason I'm in Los Angeles? Could there be another plan for me? I decided to evaluate my psychic abilities and see for myself. I bought every book I could find having to do with psychic or mediumistic development. Many of the books described different techniques for enhancing the natural psychic ability we all have. And some of the techniques described were as follows. I had to hold an object, close my eyes, and see what feelings came up about the object. And these feelings could be in the form of pictures, sounds, names, or emotions. Another technique was to hold a picture of one person or several people and write on a piece of paper any thoughts about the people in the picture. such as their ages, their likes and dislikes, whether they were happy, sad, tense, worried about something, and the like. One of the exercises involved an entire group of people. One person had to sit in a chair facing away from the group, and another person would stand about 2 feet behind the person in the chair. And then the person in the chair was to describe everything he or she felt about the person standing. Was it a male or female energy? What were the person's outstanding features? Describe the person's clothes. Did the person wear glasses? All of these exercises were designed to help me use my feelings instead of my head, to sense the world around me. I was soon incorporating several of the exercises into my everyday life. For instance, on the way to the office, I would try to guess which elevator would arrive first, or I would try to intuitively see the colors of my coworkers' clothes for that day. The more often I used my intuition, the more often my guesses were correct. On several occasions, I found these exercises quite useful and fun at the same time. I remember arranging a meeting in the conference room where I worked and trying to guess how many people would attend. My first impression was the number 24, so without asking anyone, I set up 24 chairs and 24 glasses of water. By now, many of my coworkers knew about my psychic games, so they were not at all surprised to see the room prearranged. After the room was in order, the group started to promenade through the door. One by one, they sat down until the total reached 22. I thought, how could I be off by 2? My coworker Jody looked at me and winked, as if to say, better luck next time. Needless to say, I bowed my head in disappointment. 5 minutes into the meeting, the supervisor announced the hiring of a new employee. The door opened, and there stood Mr. Ryan and his secretary, Carmen. They sat in the remaining 2 chairs. I looked over at Jody and winked back. I told you so. As I became more confident with the intuition I had developed, I began to read people. This was my way of tuning into them on an emotional level. I guess you could call it a gut reaction. It worked the same way as the exercise with the pictures. I attempted to feel what was going on inside a person. Was she a good person? Was she hiding something? Was he happy or sad? What were her desires in life? What motivated him? I registered my feelings and then looked at the physical person to see if what I picked up intuitively matched him or her physically. At first, it took some time to figure out what questions to ask myself, but after a while, it seemed to take just seconds to read someone. Once again, I found that the more often I followed my first instinct, the more often I was right. I had to learn not to be afraid to ask myself, was the feeling I received colored by my own bias or judgment? Was it my very first feeling, or had I thought about it too much? It quickly became clear to me that learning to trust my hunches and to follow my initial instinct was valuable regardless of my reasons for doing it, or where the road of life led me. Within a year of beginning my intuitive exercise program, my sensitivity had increased dramatically. People at work started to call me at home to ask questions about the future. Most of the questions concerned relationships, and those vibrations were easiest to read. At least I could immediately feel if there was something wrong. I began to get mental images of the faces of the people under discussion. I could describe the color of their hair and eyes, their jawline, sometimes right down to a birthmark. Almost every time I described the physical characteristics of the significant other over the phone, I was inevitably correct. I could also tell the type of emotional involvement the two shared. What I believe. Since the experience of the hand when I was 8 and the years in Catholic schools, I have been on a spiritual quest. On my journey, I've often been asked if I believe in the existence of God or heaven and hell. Based on my spiritual communication work and the hundreds of books I've read, I've come to the following conclusions. First of all, I do believe in God. In fact, I believe we are all God. What does that mean? Well, I believe that we are all made in the likeness of God. I'm speaking not of our human qualities, but of our spiritual qualities. Although we appear differently on the outside, we are the same inside. When we become aware of the spiritual person, we begin to see the God light within that person. And with this wisdom, we begin to realize that we are all one and the same. We are all made of the God spark. Even the lowest creature crawling on the ground is made from the same God spark. Even those who appear evil and bad are made of this same God spark. The beings who are evil are perhaps the furthest from that which is God. God is perfection in everything. God is creativity in all things. Each one of us is perfect if we would only seek our divinity. However, the majority of us get caught up in the ego self, or the human part of ourselves, so that we rarely come close to the truth of who we are. Where does God reside? My answer is within you, within the very core of you. God is your essence. God is life itself. I don't believe that God is a figure in space looking down on us, and while there have been many who have represented the great light of God in human form, the same God spark that was in them is in each one of us. God is my light, your light, and everyone else has this same light too. The difference may be in the degree. Some lights are brighter than others, and some lights are very dim. Secondly, I believe in heaven. I personally believe that heaven is the other side of our physical world and is very much like our physical world with similar sights and sounds, although more vivid and more colorful. Heaven is a place where we can stroll in a garden or ride a bicycle or row a boat. As a matter of fact, we can do anything in heaven that we want as long as we have earned it. However, many of us have been filled with the idea of a Christian heaven. I have often asked myself, well, where do the Muslims or the Jews go when they die? Certainly not to a Christian heaven. Suffice to say, each religion has a heaven and hell based on their particular beliefs. I believe there are many levels to heaven, and we go to that level we have created by our own thoughts, words, and deeds while on earth. Those of us who have grown to the same spiritual level will reside with one another in the same heaven. Beings who are more spiritually aware reside on a higher level, and less evolved souls are on a lower level. We can never go to a higher level until we earn it. However, those beings on a higher level can go to a lower sphere, and in many cases they do just that, in order to aid and assist those souls who are not as aware. So where do bad or evil people go? They go to the heaven or the hell that they have created based upon the words, thoughts, and deeds while on earth. They too exist with other beings who are on their level of spiritual evolvement. Chapter 2, The Gift. What is energy? Energy is everything. To define it in very simple terms, energy is made of molecules, rotating or vibrating at various rates of speed. In our physical world, molecules rotate at a very slow rate of speed. Also, everything in this physical world vibrates at a constant speed. That is why things on Earth appear to be solid. The slower the speed, the more dense or solid the thing. For example, the chair in which you are sitting, the house in which you live, and of course, your physical body. Beyond our three-dimensional world, the molecules vibrate at a much faster or higher rate of speed. Therefore, in such a subtle environment or ethereal dimension as the spirit world, things are freer and less dense. Within our physical body is another body usually called the astral, etheric, or spirit body. And this body is an exact replica of our physical body in that it contains eyes, hair, hands, legs, and so on. The big difference between our physical and etheric bodies is that the etheric body's molecules vibrate at a much faster and higher rate than its physical counterpart. Typically, we can't see the astral body, although some people are able to see it psychically. During the transition called death, this etheric body is released or freed from the physical body. The etheric body has no disease or fatigue that once was a part of the physical body, and it has the ability to move from one point to another through thought. A medium may have a variety of abilities. Those who are able to tune into the faster vibration of the spirit body after death, either in a physical or mental way, are called sensitives or mediums. As the term suggests, a medium is an individual who is a middleman or mediator. a person who goes between the spiritual and physical worlds. A medium is able to use energy to reach through the thin veil separating the physical life from the spiritual life. A way of looking at the concept of mediumship is as follows. Human beings are made of the superconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious minds. In mediumship, all thoughts, feelings, and sights are transmitted through a medium's superconscious, or spirit mind. We all are constantly picking up spirit impressions in this way, but it is the medium who is able to interpret them. The message then moves into the conscious mind and is revealed. The term psychic is often used as a catch-all phrase for anyone who works in the paranormal. Everyone is psychic, to some degree or another, but not everyone is a medium. A medium is not a fortune teller. In other words, the mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. Psychism and mediumship use the same mechanics of the mind, but mediumship differs from being psychic or psychism. Like mediumship, the psychism is telepathic. Telepathy is another word for mind-to-mind communication. For example, you are with a friend, and you say exactly what he's thinking. Your friend responds by saying, "You must be psychic." A person who is psychic is able to read an inanimate object or a person by tuning into the energy that emanates from the object or person. It is in this aura of the object or person that a psychic interprets revelations of the past and the future of the item or person. A psychic may also receive the energy of the object or person by feeling or seeing. And because there is no time in the energy world, few psychics can give an accurate time frame about the information received. On the other hand, a medium or sensitive is a person who is able to feel and or hear thoughts, voices, or mental impressions from the spirit world. Spirits also use telepathy. A medium is able to become completely receptive to the higher frequencies or energies on which spirit people vibrate. Hence, the mind of a spirit melds or impresses itself on the superconscious mind of a medium. And from there, the message goes into the conscious mind, and a medium reveals what a spirit is thinking or feeling. Mediumship is much more involved than basic psychism because a medium is opening him or herself to a discarnate energy. In psychism, the information does not come from a discarnate spirit who resides on a higher frequency level. A discarnate uses much of a medium's life energy to send its message. A medium works directly with a spirit, and the two have to be willing to take part in the communication process. Otherwise, there is no communication. The concept of mediumship is more easily apparent in dreams. Many times we dream of relatives or friends who have passed over. The dream feels so real that we swear we were indeed with them. We feel strongly about it. This is because while in our dream state, we were actually with our loved ones on a spiritual plane. When we sleep, our etheric or astral body travels in non-earthly realms where we encounter our loved ones and are able to communicate with them. Mediumship itself can be broken down into two distinct categories. The first and the most common type is mental mediumship. As the word mental denotes, this form of mediumship utilizes the mind, the intuitive or cosmic mind, not the rational or logical part. This type of mental mediumship falls into several distinct types: clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, and inspirational thought. Clairvoyance. Derived from the French language, clairvoyance means clear vision. A clairvoyant applies her innate sense of inner sight to see objects, colors, symbols, people, spirits, or scenes. These pictures are not visible to the naked eye and usually flash into the medium's mind as if she were physically seeing. In most cases, the sight should be recognizable to the person for whom she's reading, whom I refer to as the sitter. Clairaudience. This term means clear hearing. A clairaudient hears with the psychic ear or sensitized ear. He is able to hear sounds, names, voices, and music that vibrate on a higher frequency, much like dogs that hear at a higher frequency range than humans. Mediums, too, hear beyond our normal hearing range. A clairaudient provides the sitter exactly what he hears from that higher rate of vibration. Although he hears the actual spirit voices or whispers with the same inflection the person would have used on the earth, he tells the sitter in his own voice what he's hearing. Clairsentience. This is a form of mental mediumship that means clear feeling. A medium with clairsentience is able to sense when spirits are in the room. A true clairsentient will usually feel the spirit personality coming through his entire being. He's able to give messages to the sitter by way of strong, empathetic feelings and emotions from the spirit. In clairsentience, not only is the mind of a medium used, but a medium's emotional body as well. Inspirational thought. This is also known as inspirational speaking, inspirational writing, or inspirational art. In inspirational thought, a medium receives thoughts, impressions, knowledge, all without forethought. It differs from clairsentience because the emotional state is not as evident in inspirational thought as it is with a spirit personality coming through to speak. Inspirational thought is very objective. It has neither the intense emotions nor the spirit personality attached to the message. These are associated with clairsentience. Although inspirational thought comes from spirit, the personality of a spirit is not impressed on the receiver. A second type of mediumship is physical mediumship, and it differs from mental mediumship. In physical mediumship, the actual physical body is used. In mental mediumship, only the mind of the medium is utilized. Channeling is a well-known form of physical mediumship. There's a substance that emanates from our bodies known as ectoplasm. Ectoplasm is from the Greek ektos, meaning outside or external, and plasma, meaning something molded or formed. Ectoplasm was discovered by Dr. Charles Richet, a French professor of physiology, after he viewed a misty substance emanating from the bodies of several mediums. Ectoplasm is invisible, yet it varies in its states of denseness. It can appear as a gas, a liquid, or more commonly as sort of a cheesecloth substance. It is colorless, odorless, and its weight is said to be about 8.6 grams per liter, or less than 1 ounce in liquid measurement. Ectoplasm is found in most people, but is especially developed in mediums. It can be seen mainly in a dark setting, since the substance is extremely sensitive to light. Ectoplasm can emerge out of a medium's ears, mouth, nose, or solar plexus area. This stringy, gauze-like material can be utilized in a variety of ways, such as the following. Voice box. In this particular mediumship, ectoplasm is molded to form an artificial voice box, and through it emanates the voice of a spirit. The sound is similar to, or exactly like, the voice of a person while he or she was alive on the earth. Materialization. This is the rarest form of physical mediumship and the most amazing. Those in spirit can form anything from partial limbs, faces, heads, and torsos to complete bodies that are exact replicas of the deceased as they appeared on earth. The denseness of the materialization depends strongly on the medium's own developed state. Apports. An apport is a phenomenon in which various objects, such as jewelry, flowers, coins, and the like, materialize in a seance room. One of the beliefs behind an apport is that an object dematerializes in one place and materializes in another. Another belief is that an object is formed directly by the spirit world. Spiritual healing. Another form of physical mediumship is spiritual healing. A medium's body is imbued with healing energy from the spirit world. After much practice, a medium can cure many incurable diseases and maladies. And this is different from magnetic healing, whereby the actual vital forces of a medium are used for healing work. Spirit photography. This type of mediumship is more common. Phantom-like figures, or exact replications of deceased people, appear on photographs. One may also see whitish spots, lights, or flashes on the photographs. Spirit communication. When I feel the subtle energies around me shift, I relax and open my mind to the thoughts of those attempting to communicate. I repeat to the sitter exactly what I receive without thinking or trying to interpret the words. Now, even though the thought may not make sense to me, more than likely it will be understood by the sitter. And even though I try not to analyze what I'm hearing, sometimes I do. However, I have to constantly remind myself that what may sound insignificant to me may be of utmost importance to the sitter. Also, as a clairsentient, I can feel the death condition associated with the individual making contact. When the spirit returns to the earth atmosphere, it picks up the memory associated with its last time on the physical plane. For almost all, it is the death condition that is the most vivid. As an example, if a person passed over from a heart attack, I may experience a spiritual presence through a gripping pain across my chest. If someone died of cancer or AIDS, I may feel a sense of wasting away in my body. If a death occurred suddenly like a murder, there may be a jolt through my body. If a death was by suicide, my feeling will be based on the method of self-destruction. If a person shot himself, I may feel a sharp pain in the area where the bullet entered. My primary impressions manifest on an emotional level. Therefore, if a spirit is upset and crying, I may suddenly feel depressed and begin to cry. If a spirit laughs and jokes, I will also begin to laugh. The personality of a spirit almost always accompanies the emotional thought being sent. For instance, if a spirit had an authoritative personality on earth, the tone of my voice may become commanding. If a personality had a sharp tongue, I may speak with this trait. If the individual was very unemotional and closed off to feelings and not very demonstrative, it may take much more effort on my part as the medium to describe something emotionally. Many clients come to me seeking information from spirits regarding wealth, love, or career. Usually I tell them that they might be disappointed. The spirit people may or may not be able to provide such information. It all depends on whether the spirit knows the answer and also whether the spirit is allowed to reveal it. When a soul comes on this earth to learn certain lessons or to spiritually progress, the last thing he or she needs is for a spirit being to give the answers to a situation that may be a test. We must be aware that there are spiritual laws, and a spirit being cannot interfere or try to influence the spiritual or karmic progression of another. So certain types of information may be veiled or hidden from the sitter. The spirit people love us too much to hinder our growth. By spiritual lessons, let me explain further through the following. A woman named Marcy came to see me, and her first question was whether or not she was going to have a baby. Her grandfather came through, and he said to her, "You will first change residence and move to a place high above the water, and then have a baby boy, not before." She replied, "But I'm in my 40s, what am I going to do?" He said, "It will occur in God's time, not yours." Marcy was given further information about her move and her family, and she was told it would all happen when the time was right. A year and a half later, Marcy paid me another visit. She informed me that she had recently moved to a house above the Pacific Ocean and was 3 months pregnant. Spiritual helpers. Humankind has always believed in the existence of higher beings, or angels. Although mythological in concept, the idea of someone to watch over us is a widely accepted belief. According to religious texts, an angel is a spiritually evolved entity who exists in a heavenly plane and guards us against impending danger or disaster. Most of us were first introduced to the idea of angels as small children when we were told that we have our very own guardian angel. The idea of a guardian angel is one of the few truisms that organized religion has not destroyed. For indeed, we do have guardian angels or guides who intervene for us and assist in our earthly missions, but not in the ways they are so often depicted. In other words, our guides or angels do not have wings, nor do they sit on clouds and play harps. These images originated in mythology. and were embellished in paintings by artists. Actually, wings are the beautiful bands of color that encircle an angel. You might say it is the angel's aura or energy field, something that surrounds every living being, from plants, animals, and trees to ourselves and our own precious earth. Spirit guides are unique for each person. There are many types of guides, and to me, guardian angels and guides are one and the same. Before we were born, we mapped out a blueprint for our life's journey. When we veer off our life's path, usually a guide will help us to get back on track. Depending on our individual spiritual evolution and earthly work ahead, we will draw to us various helpers from 3 distinct categories. The first group of guides are personal guides, and these are persons we have known in previous incarnations or in between lifetimes, with whom we share an affinity. These guides assist us from spiritual realms by impressing our minds with ways to involve ourselves in certain situations. These impressions are signs from our spirit guides. Most of the time, these subtle indicators go unnoticed. But if we take the time to stop and listen and evaluate our day, we may begin to see and or hear Spirit's messages. For most people, it is difficult to feel guidance from Spirit because they want and or expect blatant directives, as if Gabriel were to blow his horn. I'm sorry, but it doesn't quite work that way. Messages and or guidance are subtle and gentle contact. The following is an example of how Spirit communication generally works. It's Thursday, and you have a meeting with a potential partner regarding a business proposition. On the way, you either lose the address or you get lost trying to find the place. This seems quite odd to you because you are familiar with this part of town. After a half hour of driving around, you locate the building, but now you can't find a parking place. You finally find one several blocks away. When you arrive at the building, the front office is locked, so you search for another way inside. A security guard opens the door, and you take the elevator to the designated floor. When you get off, the office is locked, and a note taped to the door gives direction to another office on another floor. You finally find the office and meet your prospective business partner. You listen to the deal, and throughout the conversation, you have a gnawing feeling in the pit of your stomach. You feel something, but you're not sure what it is. Nevertheless, you agree to go into business. Several months later, after investing all your life savings into this business, your new partner skips town with all your money and any trace of what turned out to be a phony business scam. Now, I realize that I've taken this scenario to the nth degree, but I wanted to point out just how spirit guidance works. There's a pattern to this story. Too many incorrect turns, wrong directions, and closed doors. If you had taken the time to observe the subtle clues, you would have understood that someone was trying to tell you something. Your spirit guides were trying to warn you. Unfortunately, too many of us go through life in fog and usually need to be hit over the head with a baseball bat to become aware of what is going on around us. On the positive side, spirit communication might go something like this. For some time, you've been looking for a job, but with no luck. A friend from whom you haven't heard in quite a while calls you and asks you to lunch. You check your calendar and note that the only day you have available is the day she suggests. When you meet her, it's as if you never lost touch. Everything feels perfect. You tell her your predicament, and she says she'll keep an eye out for you. A day later, your friend calls and tells you that a position in a nearby department just became available. You immediately call for an interview using your friend as a referral. An appointment is easily made for the next day. You get to the interview with plenty of time to spare. During your interview, the head of the department, who is usually out of town, is available to interview you right there on the spot. She meets you, likes you, and you get the job. Do you see the difference? Everything in the second example happened serendipitously. I don't think there's anything like coincidence or luck. Our spirit guides draw to us what we have earned. The person looking for a job took action with the signs from spirit. She had the free will not to meet her friend, but she chose to do so. Her guides were communicating, and she had the sense to follow. After that, everything seemed to fall into place. Becoming aware of my guides. I've become aware of my own guides and teachers through several different means. Once, a gifted clairvoyant by the name of Irene Martin Giles in England informed me that there was a nun from the Order of Sisters of Mercy who works with me to learn compassion. Her name is Sister Teresa. The clairvoyant described Sister Teresa in detail, right down to the brilliant blue color of her eyes. And when she told me this, I was astounded. As mentioned earlier, I went to a Catholic school for 8 years. The school was run by the Sisters of Mercy Order. Irene continued to tell me that a Chinese man named Chang was my spiritual teacher. Chang had come through many times to help in the delivery of messages to my clients. Finally, Irene began to draw a picture of the spirit she saw in her mind's eye. When I saw Master Chang's warm face, I felt a loving attraction to it. He wore a small cap, sort of a beanie, with an orange top and blue brim. It was the type of cap quite prevalent in China during the early 1900s. He was draped in a long cobalt blue robe that covered him fully. The robe was accented by an orange mandarin collar with matching orange cuffs. His hands were interlocked within his sleeves. His face was long and narrow, and his eyes were brown and gave a sense of wise gentleness. He wore a traditional Chinese ponytail of the period. The starkness of his bald head was alleviated by a majestic goatee. In the center of his robe, near his heart chakra, was a golden 10-pointed star that signified spiritual wisdom. In the middle of the star was a green jewel that represented unconditional love. He was surrounded by the gold light of the highest spiritual realm, and this gold light marked Chang as a master. I was not made aware of his most recent lifetime, or if he ever lived upon the earth. Many times a guide will dress in a style from a period of time that he or she enjoyed the most, or that represents a dominant aspect of his or her identification. I could tell by looking at the picture of Chang that he was a soul who had touched the human experience many times. He was truly a master teacher. How to discover your own spirit guides. I personally never thought about my guides before they appeared to me, and other mediums described them to me. I don't think it's necessary to know who your guides are, but some individuals need to know to whom they're speaking. It is a way of rationalizing that someone in spirit is around them and guiding them. It is not enough to know that they have teachers, but they want to personalize the connection. This is very understandable. Several techniques can facilitate recognition of spirit guides. The first step is meditation. You enter meditation with the intent of meeting one of your spiritual guides. When you have reached a sufficiently relaxed state, mentally begin to ask your teacher or teachers to reveal themselves in your mind's eye. If you are relaxed enough and not too anticipatory, you will become aware in your mind's eye of the face of someone, or perhaps a part of their clothing. For instance, you might see a feather and recognize this as belonging to an American Indian. At this point, you may ask to see more and allow the guide to reveal him or herself to you. Once you have satisfactorily seen a teacher, you may ask to see another, or you may ask the first one to reveal the lessons you are here to learn. Before coming out of meditation, thank your guides. I suggest that you start a journal and write about your guides and any information they reveal to you, especially what their mission is. This first exercise should be successful, depending on the degree of meditation and relaxation. If you have a difficult time discerning or seeing your teachers, here's another way to receive the same information. As you lie in bed and begin to fall asleep, ask your teacher or teachers to reveal themselves to you in a dream. Repeat the request over and over in your head, like a mantra. When you fall asleep, you should dream of your teacher or teachers. Please, be patient, because the results may not come right away. You may need to repeat your wish each night for a while until you receive results. Tragic transitions. When clients walk into my office, I have no prior knowledge of their situation or the reason for the visit. Neither do I have prior knowledge of events in their lives or whom they wish to contact. Yet within an hour, they will have shared with me some of the most intimate moments of their lives. Their grief, pain, and greatest desires are revealed as they connect with their loved ones. Often during this contact, a dramatic revelation occurs. A spark of life is relit, as they discover their loved ones are very much alive and communing with them on a daily basis. For those left on Earth, the road ahead begins to clear, as if they were stepping out of a fog. Somehow they feel that life seems possible once again. The airplane. Many of my clients are extremely distraught and nervous when they arrive for their sessions. They are grieving their loss, unsure of what to expect, and nervous about what they might encounter. These strong emotional vibrations can interfere with the quality of the communication in much the same way turning on a blow dryer or a vacuum cleaner creates static on a television set. To calm these vibrations and to help synchronize the energies in the room, I often begin a session by guiding my clients through a relaxation meditation. This helps to put their minds at ease and helps me to communicate with the spirit people more easily. Marilyn was noticeably more at peace by the time we finished the meditation. The overwhelming distress I had noted when she entered my office had given way to a calmer receptivity. I welcomed her into my séance room and tried to make her feel as comfortable as possible. As briefly as possible, I explained what she could expect, and almost immediately I felt a male presence standing to Marilyn's left side. "Do you know the name Roger?" I questioned. She replied that Roger was her husband's name. "I see him with reddish blonde hair. He's constantly combing it." As I imitated the combing motion, her eyes began to turn red. "Oh yes, he was always fussing with it. He's showing me the cockpit of a plane. The dials and arrows on the control panel have ceased to function. I see smoke and fire, then everything goes black. Does this make any sense to you?" Marilyn started to quiver as she brought out a tissue to dab her eyes. "Roger died in a plane crash a year ago. His plane went down at night. He was the one I was hoping to contact. He says to tell you he loves you very much, and he's been waiting to speak with you. He's very excited. He wants to wish you a happy anniversary." She is astonished. "Our anniversary was this past week. My God." "Someone is standing next to him, whom you know." Marilyn could not speak. "It is a little boy. He says his name is Tommy. Do you know him?" Marilyn was in a frenzy as she practically screamed with excitement. "Yes, oh yes, Tommy is my son. He was in the plane with Roger. That's how it all started. Tommy wanted Daddy to take him for a ride in the plane. He says, 'Mommy, don't be scared. I'm here with Daddy.' He asks that you please go into his room and take down the Star Wars poster from his wall. He doesn't need it anymore." Marilyn shook her head in disbelief. "That poster is hanging above his bed. He is mentioning the name Bobby and wants to tell Bobby something." "Bobby is my other son," explained Marilyn. "Tommy says he's not really mad at Bobby for taking his red shirt out of the second drawer and wearing it." There was a gasp. Once again, Marilyn could not speak. I asked her if she knew what that meant. "Bobby is wearing the red shirt today. He put it on right before I left." Marilyn was convinced that she was in contact with her husband and son. Roger continued to provide more information. He mentioned the name of his buddy in the Air Force and where he was stationed and his duties while in the service. The sudden loss of a family member can be devastating. The impact is all the more crushing when the passing includes both a spouse and a child through a violent death. These wounds are often very difficult to heal, and by the time the session concluded, Marilyn was feeling much lighter. As I walked her out to the car, she said, "James, you have changed my life. I feel like a black cloud has lifted off me. Just knowing that they're all right and that they are together makes me feel so much better. Thank you." I told her I was glad that she had gotten the information she needed. She sat for a moment, then rolled down the window of her car and looked me straight in the eye. "Actually, I'm more than better. I think now I can begin to live again." She was smiling as she pulled away from the curb. Fatal collisions. One day we will all return to our spiritual home. Of that we can be assured. However, the manner of how we leave this earth and where we arrive varies with each individual. Many leave the body unexpectedly and tragically, as Mike did in Vietnam. Unfortunately, many more people die in car accidents. As an intermediary between the spiritual and earth worlds, I have been impressed with many thoughts of those who have passed by accidents. Why this occurs needs to be explained. First, there are no accidents. Such incidents are the direct results of the spiritual law of cause and effect, or karma. Let me describe what I mean. A person goes to a party and makes a conscious decision to drink alcohol. After he is sufficiently intoxicated, he decides to call it a night and drive home. At the same time, a couple are returning home after seeing a movie. The inebriated individual's vision is blurred, and he does not see the oncoming car until too late. Unfortunately, he rams right into the couple, and they die instantly. In this scenario, the death is a result or effect of this man's decision to drink. His intoxicated impairment is the cause of the accident, and he's responsible for ending two people's lives. This is a karmic situation. A balance will have to be played out in another lifetime because the couple have died. In other words, all our actions are repaid in kind, positively or negatively, in this life or another lifetime. The law of cause and effect is a natural, immutable law of the universe, and there is a resolution to every experience by way of karmic action or the grace of God. What appears as an accident or even a natural disaster is not always what it seems. Nothing happens by chance. Not only are things based on karmic obligations, but a soul or group of souls makes an agreement in spirit before entering the physical world. Everything in life occurs as part of a spiritual plan. All of life is about learning from our experiences. In order to learn the fullness of life, each soul has to experience it all. Therefore, along with the positive, a soul must go through a negative experience. One must learn the duality of nature. It is through the negative that the positive is appreciated. And with this in mind, certain souls agree in spirit to experience a natural disaster or a plane crash and agree to leave their bodies in this manner. Is this a conscious decision? No. I don't believe it could be. Our egos would not allow this type of harm to our bodies. Another way to look at disasters and accidents is this. These souls may be finishing past karma from another lifetime. Then, too, is the question, was this accident or disaster in some way a help to others? In other words, how are family and close friends affected by this person's death? Will they have a clearer insight into love and an appreciation of life? Will the passing of a loved one be valuable to them in their spiritual growth? We cannot understand these things with our rational minds because these matters are of a spiritual nature. Suffice it to say that our lives are part of a much bigger picture than we can fathom. Often clients ask if a loved one felt pain at the time of a fatal impact. In most cases, a spirit blacks out and does not remember. Spirits frequently comment that they see the crushed vehicle and wonder what poor person has been killed. Not until they recognize their own lifeless form do they realize that they have suffered the experience. When spirits first realize their own death, they may be quite upset, to say the least, especially if they still feel very much alive. When death by accident occurs and a spirit is literally thrown out of its body, a relative, good friend, or guide will usually be nearby to assist the newcomer through the death transition. The newcomer soon understands that there is life in spirit form. It looks down at its spirit body and realizes it looks identical to its former physical body. Sometimes a spirit may wake up in a hospital, which is not the same as a hospital on earth, and be greeted by a relative or dear friend who welcomes the spirit and informs it of its passing by way of an accident. One must realize that with any death, especially a sudden one, a spirit might need further help and understanding to acclimatize itself to a new environment. Thank God there are those beautiful souls who assist them. On earth we would refer to these souls as social workers or therapists because, like them, spiritual helpers mentally assist the newly arrived into an unfamiliar environment. When I work with bereaved parents, they often say that the loss of a child is the worst experience one can ever have in life. No one is ever prepared for a child's death. The grieving parents inevitably blame themselves for the child's death, as if they were responsible or able to prevent it. But only God has that power. AIDS. Throughout recorded history, each generation has been challenged with a devastating plague of one type or another. It's unfortunate that I have to write a chapter devoted to this subject, but AIDS has become commonplace in today's society. It has taken its position among cancer and heart disease as a killer of the masses, and often I've been asked, why does AIDS exist? What must we learn from it? Hundreds of books have been written attempting to unravel these questions. I'm not one to profess a wealth of knowledge on the subject, nor would I attempt to give an explanation in the book for its existence. I believe the reasons are too complex and that there are no simple answers to these questions. I can only relate to the reader my experience of this disease from a spiritual point of view, from those who have crossed the threshold of death and have explained why they personally had to go through the AIDS experience. Let me reiterate one point. All things are created from universal thought. Even though we do not see thought, it exists. I've pointed out earlier that there is a universal law of cause and effect that is constant, much like the movement of energy that animates our world. In other words, it is our thinking that creates the conditions of our lives. Very few of us live the truth of who we are. Instead, we misuse the power of our own thoughts. Even those who preach truth seem unable to live up to their godly philosophy. So instead of using our thoughts to share the ideals of an unconditional loving God, we turn our energy to bigotry and prejudice. Too many people seem preoccupied with playing God on earth, and some use their material power to take control and dominate others. Only the ego is greedy for self-serving power, and it can find it anywhere. In a corporate boardroom, or in a government committee room, or on a church pulpit. Alongside of power is the belief that a certain amount of material wealth makes us special or valuable. We all are aware that some of us have profited and still profit by the exploitation of other human beings. And ultimately, it is up to us as individuals to know that our worth and value cannot be measured by any amount of money that we may have in the bank, or the size of our house, or the number of cars we own. When we pass on to the other side, the only question we will be asked has to do with the amount of love we have in our hearts. We are all the same. God has not chosen one group above another. When we dare to be aware, we will raise our understanding and compassion and see everyone as part of the universal energy of God. We will be free of prejudice and hatred based on someone's color, race, sex, or gender preference. God is not limited. Only humans limit their thinking. I personally believe that by spreading hatred, prejudice, and intolerance, we have contributed to the spread of AIDS. It is our wrong way of thinking that causes a general feeling of malaise and lack of harmony that our world finds itself in today. People often ask if there is a cure for AIDS. I tell them yes. There's a cure for every type of malady that afflicts us, but no cure will be found until we begin to shift our consciousness away from self-serving attitudes and begin to appreciate and love each other. The condition known as AIDS, although a horrendous disease, has also been an incredible opportunity for growth and enlightenment. Previously associated with gay men, it has now reached the general population. People throughout this planet have been reluctant to realize the extent of its existence. However, we are finally becoming educated to the fact that we are all in the AIDS matter together. Because of AIDS, we are being forced to learn lessons of tolerance, understanding, acceptance. This condition also brings out elements of people's personality and character they did not realize as part of themselves. So many of the infected individuals question, among other things, their spirituality, their unique universal existence, their fear of the unknown, and most importantly, the element of love. Our souls grow the most under the greatest stress, and this is true not only for those afflicted, but their families and friends as well. During sessions with spirits who have passed with this condition, many gave reasons for having to go through this experience. The spirits prefaced their communication by explaining that their life paths were chosen long before they came to earth. Many have said that they are helping to balance the negative karma of this planet created by our wrong way of thinking about and behaving toward each other. People who have passed from cancer have told me the same thing. The heart. The beauty of my work is not only that I've enlightened others about the truth of life after death, but I have witnessed incredible and miraculous changes in people because of it. The following session was one of the most touching experiences of eternal love I had ever encountered. Many times I'm given information that does not make sense to the person until later. Such was the case during my reading with a young man named Tom. As I began to tune into his energy, I noticed a young man standing at his right side. He began to describe the conditions of his death, about which I knew nothing prior to the sitting. I have a gentleman here who gives you a lot of love. He is standing to your right side. He has blue eyes, brown hair, and wears a beard. He died rather young. It seems he should have died later in life. Would you know who this might be? Yes, I think so, Tom replied. He gives me a sense of being out of it, as if he was on drugs. I feel he was on pain medication, something like morphine. Yeah, that's right. I also feel he had trouble breathing. I think he had to be given oxygen. I also feel very weak. It feels like a condition of AIDS. Do you understand this? Tom begins to cry. Yes. I understand. That's how he died. He gives you his love and says he's around you all the time. He's been trying to tell you he is with you, but you don't see him, and he gets very frustrated. He says you received a promotion at work? Well, yeah. My supervisor just spoke to me today about the possibility. Your friend is laughing. He says he helped get it for you, and now you owe him. Tom laughed. Do you know the name of Gary? That's his name. That's his name. He mentions something about the front yard and you're wanting to plant flowers. He shows himself watering the lawn and says something about you're not using the right flowers. Do you know what this means? Yes, I think so. I went to the nursery last week and bought some flowers for the front yard. I brought them home and haven't planted them yet. I asked, why not? When I got home, I put them next to the others, and the colors didn't match, so I have to take them back. Gary was very particular about his garden and used to water it every day. I knew he wouldn't like those colors mixed together. I don't dare plant flowers that don't fit into his color scheme. He just wouldn't like it. And he doesn't, I exclaimed. We both laughed. He's telling me you were in a garage. He's telling me you were in the garage looking through some boxes. He shows me photo albums. Does this make sense? Yes, I was doing that this week. I'm thinking of moving, and I wanted to see what stuff to keep and what not to. Gary says you've already spoken to someone about selling the house, and you've been looking at one behind where you live now. I don't understand that. Gary said to wait. You will. He shows me something to do with two hearts joined together. Do you have something like this in the bedroom? Tom could not place the hearts. He mentally went through the house and could not picture what I was describing. I told him that it might make sense later. Gary wants me to tell you he loves you very much, and he always will. He wants you to know he's always with you. Tom expressed his love back to Gary and his happiness in knowing Gary was around him. Gary will send you some kind of sign so you will know he's with you. That would be great. I can't wait. With that, the session ended. Tom assured me that he felt a relief from the session. He recognized Gary's personality coming through in many things that were said. He thanked me and went on his way. 4 months later, Tom returned to see me, and he relayed an amazing event. He said that after his reading with me, he went home and put his tape away, not thinking any more of the session. 3 weeks later, he got the promotion Gary said he would get. Tom explained further, my coworker gave me 2 cards. The first was a congratulatory card for the promotion. Then, she said, the strangest thing happened. As she was leaving the card store, she stopped in front of another card and felt compelled to buy it. She didn't understand why, but she knew she had to give it to me. When I opened the card, it had 2 hearts joined together. Printed inside was the message, I love you. Now, Tom said that there was something familiar about the card. So he returned home and went through all the boxes filled with letters and cards Gary had given him. When he opened them, he understood the meaning of the card. All had been signed the exact same way. I love you, Gary. As living individuals, we are made up of everything we have ever experienced in past lifetimes. In other words, our present lifetime is a compilation of past thoughts, actions, and deeds, positive or negative, that we have brought with us. Now, because of past karma, we find ourselves being reborn into certain family situations with a particular economic and social status that is necessary for our spiritual growth. Before coming into an earthly incarnation, a soul prepares for its new life in the spiritual realms. It is common for a soul to return to a field of work in which it had previous lifetimes of interest or experience. Let's say a soul plans to experience earth life in the year 2021 as a medical professional. It will spend time with its guides and teachers, perfecting necessary skills, and will look into medical breakthroughs and technologies that will be available at that time. It may also become aware of new diseases or scourges that will affect humankind, and it will learn how to help spread knowledge and love to everyone through its potential work on earth. As a soul becomes aware of this knowledge, it is integrated into a new personality. It is vital the soul understands the value of its participation in the future of humankind and how it will affect the lives of many others. As spiritual beings, we are forever learning, developing, and evolving. We look at our future incarnation as sort of a blueprint of what we are attempting to accomplish and learn as we walk in the physical body. Therefore, we pick opportunities and experiences on the earth that are optimum for our spiritual growth and awareness. Our karma is intertwined with the timing of our next incarnation and our experience in it. Ultimately, we are all here to learn love. It may sound simple, but by and large, it's not easy. Love has many aspects. One of the first lessons we are attempting to learn is a love of self. Without love and awareness of self, we will not know how to love others. Once we have mastered such unconditional love of self and others, we become enlightened and have respect for the natural law of cause and effect, not because we want a better position in life, but rather because we know it is the only way. And by understanding this law and by living it, we come to respect each other's uniqueness. Then we can live in accordance with our fellow human beings for the betterment of all. The inclination towards suicide. This earth is a place to experience elements and aspects of the human condition we cannot experience anywhere else. It's a place of growth, and growth is never easy. Most people alive today are constantly challenged with worries of survival. We are bombarded by financial, employment, emotional, or health concerns. Many times these worries are associated with feelings of self-destruction. We think, I can't get through this, or I would be better off dead. It is quite common for most people to feel suicidal at least once in their lives. However, this feeling comes and goes as situations change. The type of personality who's obsessed with the idea of self-destruction and makes several attempts to end his or her life usually belongs to one of the following categories. A person with a controlling personality, a person who has a very negative self-image, those who are terminally ill and don't want to go through the pain and suffering, and those who are mentally ill or have a biochemical imbalance. It's understandable that because of certain feelings, circumstances, and beliefs, one could find a perfect rationale for doing away with one's life. However, from a spiritual point of view, it's not right. We each have a destiny to which we are born. Our karmic destiny may last for only 1 month or 35 years or 80 years. Before we return to this earth, we fill ourselves with a strong desire for birth and physical experience. And we enter this world with a timing mechanism built into our psychic web. When life is cut short, our physical body ceases to exist. But we must understand that the magnetic ties we have to the earth are still active. These ties are severed only when we have completed our preordained time on the physical plane. For as it is written, every season has its time. When a person kills himself, one of the first things he realizes is that he's not dead. He has an overwhelming feeling of being very heavy because the earth ties are still part of his nature. In a way, we can say the soul is not totally free. The mortal personality dies, but not the immortal soul. The soul remains stuck between the physical world and the spiritual world, alive but unable to communicate with loved ones or anyone else. The soul feels guilt, pain, and anguish for a life cut short. He learns of his destiny and how beneficial and meaningful his life would have been if he had stayed alive. In the spiritual state, he becomes aware of why he had to go through the particular experiences that drove him to suicide. He also senses the grief and anger of those he left behind. The most unfortunate circumstance is that he finds himself in a limbo state. He's not able to go to the heaven worlds, nor is he able to return to the physical world. He's stuck in no man's land, with the constant memory of his horrific act. He sees his death over and over again, and it plays like a bad movie. He is trapped, and there's no way out of the theater. While some are conscious of what they've done, many suicide victims may not even be aware that they've passed over. On the whole, these souls automatically relive their final death over and over again. The suicide act becomes an endless loop, and it can be pretty gruesome. Eventually the time comes when they realize that they are actually dead to the physical plane. Behind any act, there is a powerful force known as motive. It is this motive that is the determining factor, not only for a suicide, but for every action in our lives. Through motive comes action, and we create actions based on motives. As I've stated many times, there's a natural law of cause and effect. In other words, action is a direct result of motive. In the case of terminally ill or elderly persons, some are sick and want to save their family's time, money, and heartache by committing suicide. These persons are unaware of the spiritual side of their actions. Perhaps before coming into the physical plane, family members set up certain conditions and situations in order to work out their group karma, or they needed to experience being of service to the one who is ill. Furthermore, some argue that assisted suicide is best. It stops suffering and gives death some dignity. But who can play God? How do we know that a soul didn't choose to go through an experience of a fatal illness in order to burn away karma? If we cut short someone's natural time on earth, we never know whether something valuable could have been learned, or whether such an experience was necessary to reach a new spiritual plateau. In any event, when suicide occurs, a soul will have to go through and learn the experience again, having to return in another lifetime with the same or similar ailment. The ailment may not be as extreme as it was in the previous life because part of it has already been lived out. Usually a soul has to exhaust a disease so it can never be affected by it again. There are two exceptions to the wrongdoing of suicide. Number one, if suicide is brought about by individuals who are mentally ill or have a biochemical imbalance. In these situations, those persons are not completely conscious of their decisions. When they pass over, they find themselves in sort of a ward where they are helped to heal their mental conditions, and their soul nature is restored to its proper state. Number two, the second exception to suicide is a soul who comes back to the physical world before its proper time and is not mature enough to handle the lessons it thought it could. Even though a soul thinks it has certain strength, it arrives on earth and does not feel comfortable. Those with this shortcoming have often said prior to their death words to the effect, "I don't fit in. I don't think it's the right time for me." Because it's the nature of a soul to grow and learn, we always bring into our lives specific situations to overcome or balance out. If we realize that while on earth it is normal to experience physical, mental, or emotional pain, and suicide does not take away any of it, I believe there would be fewer suicides. We need to educate ourselves, and especially our young people, about the wrongs of suicide and accentuate the responsibility of living life fully. Like any moral judgment, each soul has to make big decisions on its own. For once again, I will say each soul is unique and each has different spiritual needs and must experience what is best for its soul's growth. There are no right or wrong answers. It's not our job to judge the decisions of others in these matters, but to consider the experience and lesson from a spiritual point of view. loving reunions. I personally believe the most crucial aspect of my work is to dispel the power we give to the emotion of fear. Fear is not only an illusion, but the largest block to personal growth and the potential of the human spirit to excel. Fear binds people to inner conflict and deprives them of a sense of individual freedom. By being in fear, we cannot live in love, and indirectly we say goodbye to a lifestyle rich in creativity and productiveness. Fear is like a vicious cycle. When we tune into it, we give it life. Then we attract the very thing we fear, and consequently, the fear becomes our reality. In other words, the old adage, what you fear comes upon you, is true. We must remember that our thoughts create. Thought is God's energy or creativity. We can use this energy any way we please because we have free will. We must also realize that we are responsible for the results of our thoughts. When we persist in thinking a certain way, such as in fear, such thought energy takes shape in our life. When I begin the process of reading my clients psychically, I inform them of the way they allow fear to enter into their minds and how their fears affect their bodies, their overall health, and their lives in general. As simply as possible, I help them to recognize this adversary and to find ways in which they can change the beliefs that lead to their fears. If they truly get it, they access an enormous number of creative possibilities within themselves. At first, it's very difficult. People are not likely to change so quickly, especially after decades of conditioning by their families, society, and religious control. But, if anything, I am able to plant a seed and enlighten them to see all the possibilities. By opening a new door in their thinking, I can steer them to use their thoughts in positive and loving ways. One of the biggest fears is the fear of loss. Now, to some, this fear appears as an impossibility to acknowledge any happiness, goodness, or abundance in their lives. To those who have everything they have always wanted, they might feel on some level that they don't deserve happiness or are not worthy of abundance. Others cannot even imagine a life of fullness and joy because it's too good to be true. They think that something will go wrong, and it usually does. I often tell my clients to remember that we are made from the light. The light is all-encompassing, always creative and always bountiful. Even though one does not see the light, we must believe that through God, light, anything is possible. God always says yes. We are the ones who say no. Included in this fear of loss is the fear of death. And I definitely believe, and this may go back to my psychology classes on Freud, that unconsciously, the desire and instinct to stay alive is the strongest. And many of us are primarily ego-based and do not want to even acknowledge an end to life. And therefore we fear death. This fear results from the fact that death is a condition over which we have no control. Death is the absolute unknown. It is beyond our human senses and rational, logical thinking. We fear the unknown because we don't know what to expect. We not only don't know what to expect of death, but where, if any place, we go. It is unfortunate that death is the ultimate news story because it is this kind of scary thinking, constantly shaped by our society's primitive view of death, that reinforces our fear. It's amazing to me that so many people still believe that when we die, we cease to exist. I feel the work I do is valuable in dissolving such a view and in opening people's minds to something beyond their physical senses. The moment I relay a spirit message to a loved one, a person's life is usually changed forever. As I look back over the years, I wish I could have captured these incredible experiences on videotape. It is difficult to relate people's reactions in words. It's just not the same as watching them in person in all their glory. With this book, I've attempted to share with you some of that feeling. When a connection between the two worlds, physical and spiritual, has been bridged, nothing short of a miraculous reunion occurs. Beyond grief. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. Ecclesiastes 3:1. Do we ever get over the loss of a loved one? Is it possible to start life anew without our dear one sharing it with us? Will our memories of pleasant times together help us get our lives back? There are no easy answers to these questions. Once someone passes out of the world of the physical into the world of the spiritual, we can never physically experience them again the way we once knew. But we can always experience them and have them share in our lives by keeping their memories alive in our minds and hearts, and by realizing that as spiritual beings not limited to physical properties, they are more often around us than ever before. As the Bible quote says, there's a natural time and place for every occurrence or experience on this earth. Each time we come back to the physical world, we go through a growth experience of the soul. Every occurrence in our lives determines and measures our growth. Like the cycle of the seasons, when something dies in the winter to be born again in the spring, it is impossible to have life without an ending and a new beginning. Everything we do is about growth. To this end, every living creature on this planet experiences loss in one way or another. It may be loss of a job or loss through a divorce, an accident, or crime. It may be an unrealized goal or just growing older. We might consider these losses as distressing life changes, but we often find that these too have their time and place in our lives. In order to experience a loss and transform it, there are steps we can take to start on the successful road to a healthier, fuller, and more centered life. The first of these steps is to recognize and deal with our grief. Grief has many appearances: physical, mental, and emotional. Helplessness, anxiety, sleeplessness, fear, despair, irritability, anger, depression, nausea, shortness of breath, heart palpitations, even thoughts of suicide can all be considered symptoms or signs of grief. It's important to realize that grieving over the loss of someone, or even something like a job, is very normal and quite natural. When we grieve, we feel as though our lives are over and that they will never be the same again. We feel that we cannot go on, even one more day, without the person we lost. We feel as if our whole world has turned upside down. Nothing seems to fit or make any kind of sense. We seem to be totally out of balance in every area of our lives. We can't think straight. We can't make decisions correctly. We often find that we cannot control our emotions, or we cry sporadically over the smallest of challenges. All of these feelings are very much a part of the grief experience and should never be dismissed or judged as wrong. At such a time, it is common for bereaved individuals to have a sense of apathy for their own physical, emotional, and spiritual welfare. It is of the utmost importance for individuals to be able to cope with their grief with the goal of restoring some sense of well-being to their lives. How do we do this? How do we recover from our grief? Although the focus of this book is the loss of a loved one, the following stages are applicable to any loss of a person, a pet, a home, a job, or living with a long-term illness. This healing process applies in most situations where we feel at loss. First step, shock. When people hear that a loved one has died, their first reaction might be one of shock, or they could experience a sense of numbness, thinking, this could not have happened. They might reject the idea that a loss has occurred at all. Number 2, denial. Whenever we feel hurt, our tendency is to deny it. And by doing this, we seem to ease our pain. We so want the hurt not to exist, so by denying our pain, we fool ourselves into thinking it doesn't exist. Again, it is the unconscious part of ourselves trying to cope with loss. Denial can manifest in many ways. 1, we lose interest or stop our involvement in everyday affairs. 2, we sleep too much or suffer from insomnia. 3, we lose our appetite. 4, we don't take interest in our daily hygiene. And 5, we become depressed and can't seem to snap out of it. Once again, it's important for us to understand that denial is a normal stage of the grief process and that we can eventually get beyond it. Number 3, just feel. The first step on the road to healing yourself is to accept the reality of the situation, that you have suffered a loss. The loss is real, and the recognition of it is important. It is normal to feel. Make sure you feel. Do not repress your anger, your sadness, your upset, or your helplessness. These feelings are all very natural. Do not cover or hide your feelings, thinking you are immature or that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. If you feel like crying, let it out. Cry. Crying is a natural reaction and is very necessary in healing the body. There is, in fact, scientific proof that tears of sadness are biochemically different from tears of laughter and joy. So crying actually helps you to release certain chemicals from your body. 4. Acknowledgement and acceptance. Once we've gone through our shock, denial, hurt, pain, and anger, we will progress into a stage of acknowledgement and acceptance of the actual death. And this is the first step in bringing back some sort of balance to our lives. Number 5, settling practical matters. Besides emotionally dealing with a loss, it's also important to establish a sense of order in your daily life from a financial and practical point of view. And this is especially true if the deceased handled the money in your relationship. Again, do not be scared to ask for help. A family member or friend may be able to offer some advice in this area. Number 6, moving on. When the sun sets, it also rises again. You have been through an incredible emotional period, and at times it seemed unbearable and you did not want to go on any further. However, the time has arrived when you are ready to assess your life and move on. A new chapter in your life has begun. You are now at a perfect place to seek guidance from a support or grief group. Watch for behavior that could lead to impairment or injury. It's important to realize that there will be setbacks, so keeping track of feelings and mood swings is necessary. For instance, many people fall back into denial, disbelieving that death has occurred. Certain individuals are not able to come out of their denial and grief, and they may exhibit some sort of self-destructive behavior. Be aware of the following signs. If these signs continue for a long period of time, professional help is needed. Number 1, an individual may begin to entertain thoughts of suicide. This is common at first, but if a person persists with the actual means of how he or she wants to accomplish this, it's a red flag. Get preventative assistance. Number 2, a grieving person may need at first to take some medication such as tranquilizers and mood elevators. Because a person could easily become dependent on such medication, he or she needs careful monitoring. Number 3, if an individual stays completely detached from his or her normal activities and starts to obsess or stays alone in a depressed state for a long period, it's time to seek a professional counselor who deals specifically with grief. Though the grief process is painful, it is a part of the experience of life that we will inevitably go through. We all will feel the loss of someone we love. We must realize that we will survive. Even though it might not be clear right now, your light on this earth is needed. There's no one else on earth like you because you are indeed unique. People need you. At a time of loss, you may experience a sense of self-imposed guilt or worthlessness, thinking if only or I should have, but this self-abuse is not necessary. Don't feed into it. Realize that the grief you experience can assist you in being a bit more sensitive to others in a similar position. One day, you will be able to help someone else go through the grieving process. The loss you suffer, no matter how great, does not compare to the greatness that is you. Be kind to yourself and give yourself a big hug. Tell yourself how much you love and appreciate yourself for being alive and having the strength and courage to go through such an incredible adventure called life. Making contact. I've had enormous interest from people who desire to make contact with their departed loved ones on their own. There are others who feel they too possess a strong psychic or mediumistic link, and they want to develop this part of themselves further. I'm providing information in this section for both purposes. It would not be right of me to instruct those of you who just want to make contact with loved ones without providing a basic understanding of the mechanics of mediumship. I believe the more knowledge you have of this material, the more successful the results. I urge you to listen to the following concepts and apply them whenever necessary. This is not a game. It's not my intention to teach you some tricks so you can amuse others with your psychic abilities. The development of your intuition must be taken seriously and with respect. You cannot ring a bell and expect a spirit to suddenly appear. In order to be successful, you will have to work at it. Remember, your results will reflect the amount of discipline, time, and desire you have to develop your abilities. At the same time, you must realize that your spirit family also shares a desire to get in contact with you and would do anything possible to let you know that they are alive. Spirits are constantly around us, and although some are able to get through without much work on our part, others may find it quite difficult. We are all mediums in our own right. As we have become aware, a medium is an instrument, an in-between, that the spirit world utilizes to convey a particular message. For what is mediumship but being inspired with thoughts, words, or feelings different from our own? Artists, musicians, doctors, chefs, and almost every living creature is inspired by thoughts. Many times we may think these thoughts are our own, but more often than not, they emanate from spiritual realms. Through these thoughts, the best parts of our creative character come forth. Creativity is not limited to the arts. A doctor utilizing a scalpel is just as creative in his science as a ballerina performing a pirouette. What is the reason behind your interest in developing your inner abilities and contacting your loved ones? Is it something frivolous, like asking for the winning lottery numbers? Is it to find out where a relative left the will so you can get your share of the estate? Is it to find out the name of the person who murdered your child? Or is it one of idle curiosity? If your interest pertains to any one of these reasons, then my best advice would be to read a good mystery or suspense novel and obtain your excitement from that. You cannot seek contact in order to get revenge or to satisfy personal greed. There is no room for self-indulgence in spirit. It is only the work of selfless love. For love is the strongest component in bringing us closer to spirit. If you want to make contact and explore the spiritual realms, and by doing so advance yourself spiritually, and in turn enlighten others, then and only then would I agree that your motivations are correct. Whenever we do psychic work, we must prepare ourselves accordingly in order to be a clear channel for spirit. Preparation takes place not only on the physical level, but on the emotional, mental, and spiritual levels as well. Psychically, one should eat a sound diet. The purer the diet, consisting mostly of vegetarian cuisine, with very little or no refined sugars and caffeine, the better the body can channel spirit. Red meat in particular slows down the vibration of the body, and in doing so slows down one's higher ranges of sensitivity. The number one glandular system used in this work is our endocrine glands, and specifically the adrenals. Therefore, we must protect them and put as little stress upon them as possible. Sweets and caffeine, aside from playing havoc with our blood sugar levels, also have an adverse effect on the adrenal system by speeding it up. Alcohol lowers the body's natural vibratory rate and should never be used when one is preparing to open oneself up to the spiritual worlds. The continued use of alcohol, and drugs as well, could very possibly draw entities to you who are on lower vibratory rates of the astral world. And these entities could easily influence you and the information you are receiving in a negative or detrimental way. Remember, you are opening yourself to many levels of spirit. You want to make sure you do everything possible to link up to the highest one possible. When we deal with the spiritual realms, we are dealing with a world very different from anything we can see with our physical eyes. To do this work properly, we must begin to turn off the outside world and be prepared to enter into a world of inner sight and knowledge. In every class I teach, I begin my lecture by informing people that we are going on an exploration to a new world, a new universe all its own, the world of our inner being. to become aware of your inner world, it is best to start with meditation. The first step is to close your eyes and become conscious of your breathing. As you do, you will realize that each inhalation is a gift from God and should be treated properly with a sense of reverence and respect. You never know when your last one will be. As you exhale, see all the unnecessary thoughts and negative feelings, frustrations, and doubts you hold on to, and let them go. Become aware of your body. Sense every muscle, organ, and tissue. See your blood flowing freely throughout your body. Feel. Everything is made of energy. We must familiarize ourselves with this understanding. Molecules of a life force surround us and run through us all the time. Therefore, we are each an individual energy center, a little world of our own with energy circles and links running in and around our body. We can change these energy patterns, colors, and frequencies based upon our thoughts and desires. We can send out energy and receive energy as long as our channels are open and sensitized. How can we feel this energy? Let's start with a simple exercise that will introduce you to this energy. Close your eyes and hold your palms facing each other, about 2 feet apart. Hold them there for about 3 to 4 seconds. Place all your awareness to the area between the palms and very slowly move them together as though you were squeezing an accordion. Sense the feeling between the palms as they move closer together. Move your hands in a circular motion and feel the subtle energy shifts. You might try this a couple of times, but don't worry. You will feel it eventually. When developing your psychic abilities, it's important to educate yourself with the 7 main energy centers. These energy centers are known as chakras, a Sanskrit word meaning wheel of energy. Root chakra. This is located at the base of the spine and is known as the seat of our life force. On the physical level, it is associated with the spine, adrenals, kidneys, and colon. It's a red energy and represents our survival instinct, a strong physical capacity and vitality. Solar plexus chakra, known also as the sacral chakra. This center is located 2 inches below the navel. It is the seat of all intuition and psychic sensitivity. It is known as a feeling center, a place where all raw emotions are stored. Because this center is primarily on a feeling level, clairsentience and psychometry emanate from this area. Spleen chakra. The 3rd center is located above the navel in the spleen area. At this level, raw emotions are elevated to a finer vibration, and this is the center of our feelings, will, and autonomy. In this area, affects the digestion and the organs of the stomach, pancreas, adrenals, liver, and gallbladder. On the physical level, it is the connection to the silver cord and enables us to astral travel. Heart chakra. Located in the center of the chest between the shoulder blades, the heart chakra is the seat of unconditional love. Here the higher spiritual elements of compassion, trust, giving, receiving, and nurturing are felt, and the desire to serve people. Throat chakra. When this center is developed, it is used for clairaudience, to hear spirit. One actually can hear a physical sounding voice of the spirit being, or may hear thoughts as if listening to the spirit. It also works with the heart center for trance work. In mediumship, the throat chakra, along with the spleen and solar plexus chakras, assist with direct voice mediumship or channeling. Third eye chakra. Probably the chakra area most known to the public, this very important center is located in the center of the forehead, and when developed on a psychic level, it is used for the gift of clairvoyance. When opened, we can see auras, images of all shapes and colors, and spirit people. In the physical body, it's associated with the ears, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, and the nose. The color indigo corresponds to this seat of vision. crown chakra. The seventh center is located at the very top of the head, and this center is the doorway to the higher or cosmic forces. When developed, it can be used to influence all the other centers and bring the highest of spiritual truths to all sensitive work. It is the seat of prayer and protection, mysticism and enlightenment. Meditate on a beautiful violet color, which represents this chakra. It influences the cerebral cortex and central nervous system of the physical body. To grow from our experiences, we must give ourselves the proper amount of time to develop, for everything has a rhythm and a creative energy all its own. In many cases, especially in the paranormal, there is no clock to measure our progress. One of the most important tools is patience. We begin to give birth to a new side of ourselves, a part that has been dormant for many, many years. The past years have been filled with various belief systems, behaviors, and emotionally charged experiences, and we must dig through them in order to bring ourselves back to the truth and our infinite source. I'm speaking of that child part that we closed down at the age of 6 or 7 when innocence was replaced with rational thought. In this work, the more we use the rational mind, the less progress we will make. When we expend too much energy analyzing a thought or message, we leave little of that precious energy to utilize for the actual psychic and spiritual work. Progress takes time. Love. You are on this earth to learn basic lessons of love and responsibility of self and others. And these lessons present themselves in our everyday experiences. Anytime you begin to work with spirit, you must come from a center place of love. There should be no greed or need for self-importance. Spiritual work allows no room for the ego. I'm not saying that to be a spiritual person you must be void of ego. Ego is important in order to get the work done, but one must never let the ego go before the love. As you develop, you will begin to see the many different and varying aspects of love, for there are many forms of love. The more you become involved with this work, the more you will begin to recognize even the smallest act of love as significant. Development exercises. Meditation. To increase your sensitivity and inner awareness of the spiritual realms, you should begin a regular practice of meditation. Your desire to develop will determine the length of time spent in meditation. If you're just starting out, I would recommend meditation at least twice a week. Make it a habit to meditate at the same time on the appointed day. In this way, you not only begin to set up a sense of discipline, but also let the spirit world know that it is your time for spiritual practice and development. The length of time of meditation varies. If you can, try to sit for at least 15 minutes the first time, slowly working up to 30 minutes and gradually to 45 minutes. However, do not feel pressured about how much time you spend. The amount of time will eventually be guided by spirit, not by you. Circle. Most people who are interested in pursuing their mediumistic gifts usually find it much more beneficial and more expeditious, in addition to meditating on their own, to sit in what is known as a development circle. A development circle is made up of 2 or more individuals who come together each week at the same time to sit and develop the mediumistic energies of the participants in the circle. And usually a circle consists of the same participants who sit at the same time each week. It is important that the group members are harmonious to each other's energies. There should be no conflict or ego problems. Otherwise, such conflict will have a negative result on the group's development and hinder the group from attaining the highest of spiritual teachings available to them. You will always draw those spirit beings to your group who work well with the vibration created. Being a group member is a commitment and should not be entered unless all are willing to sacrifice at least 1 to 2 hours the same time each week. Basic psychic exercises. Success in the spirit world is measured by an individual's sensitivity. Work either with meditation or in a circle. Both will prepare you to feel and perhaps see and hear spirit. The time comes when you are ready to put into practice your psychic and spiritual abilities. The following are ways to test your skills. Psychometry. Psychometry is an ability to feel or sense the history of an object or the person to whom it belongs through the emanations of energy from the object. Psychometry can be used with someone who has passed over to the other side or for anyone still living on the physical plane. First, of course, Get into a meditative or light trance state in which you are totally relaxed. Next, hold an object with your left hand and immediately sense the energy of the object. You may receive impressions, such as physical characteristics or the appearance of the bearer of the object. You may receive feelings on an emotional basis. Remember, psychometry can be done with any object, including photographs. Automatic writing. Automatic writing is an exercise used specifically for those who desire to contact spirit guides and loved ones. It requires a complete meditative state to begin. It is also necessary to send out a thought to the spirit to be contacted with the exact time and place that will be used to do this work. In essence, you are making an appointment to talk to the spirit world. And when the appointed time arrives, become meditative. Remember, you want to be in a room where there are few or no distractions. Next, sit upright at a table with a pad of paper and pen in front of you. Lightly hold a pen to the pad, but do not think of what to write. When you feel a change in the energy in your hand or around your body, begin to ask questions of the spirit. Dreams. Many people have asked if it is possible to reach those who have passed over through dreams. The answer is an unequivocal yes. The spirit body leaves the physical body every night when we go to sleep. The physical body is replenished with cosmic energies, and the spirit body is doing the same on a higher level. In the dream state, we are very susceptible to impressions from spirit because we're not involved on a conscious or mental level. In other words, much of our control is at rest, as is our rational thinking. Therefore, we can be more easily impressed. In the spirit body, we are able to see our loved ones and guides and possibly foresee future events or even past lives. It's also a time when our spirit family communicates with us. And since we are closer to the spirit levels than our dream state, it is much easier to communicate with those who have passed on. Visions. Many have said that they see their loved ones standing in their room next to the bed or sitting in the living room chair. When you are more receptive and not mentally blocked, it is very possible for you to indeed see them. Make a pact. Another exercise to contact the spirit world is simply to ask your spirit friend to be present at a particular time of the day. Explain that you want proof of their existence by their doing a particular task. For instance, a client whose son passed over asked him every night, "I want you to set up a signal with me, that you are here." Blink on the street lamp once if your answer is yes, and twice if your answer is no. After 2 months of this daily request, she found he was responding exactly the way she asked. This may not be successful for everyone who attempts it. Obviously, this mother and her spirit son were quite determined, and the results were successful. It's easier when you ask the spirits to demonstrate their presence by performing little tasks. Don't ask them to move objects or open doors or sing a song. Make it easy. Due to the energy makeup of spirits, we have found the easiest way for them to make themselves known is to use something electrical. Spirits can affect electricity in a variety of ways. Many spirit people are able to influence the electrical force field of protons and electrons and affect changes in various electrical objects throughout the house. And this is usually most prevalent if the deceased was someone of a very high emotional caliber. Emotional energy can be used as a conductor. Results. The following are ways spirits let their loved ones know that they are around them without the use of a medium. Lights. Many times you'll see the flickering of lights in the room or new light bulbs burn out instantly. Television. Spirits have been known to effectively scramble pictures on the TV set. Radios. Many clock radios next to loved ones' beds will turn on at different hours. Sometimes it's an hour that has some sort of significance to the loved one who passed. Music. Many times in their own way, spirits are able to impress you with a song, or you may think about them when a song is played on the radio. Clocks. It has been reported that a clock will stop at the exact moment the loved one has passed over, or a clock or watch will stop working for no obvious reason. Telephones and answering machines. After someone dies, it is possible to receive a phone call and no one is on the other end of the line. Or you may actually hear the voice of the spirit. In some cases, the voice has been recorded on answering machines. Appliances. Appliances have been known to stop or start working at different times when no one is around them. It is another way that spirits attempt to get our attention. Computers. EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon, has become quite a popular result in the past several months. Not only has the spirit world been able to utilize telephones and answering machines, but spirits have also appeared on the screens of computers. Smells. A very common sign immediately after or within several months following a transition is scent. Suddenly, one becomes aware of a faint smell of a cigar or roses or of a familiar perfume, and these scents are definitely associated with those who have departed. Gifts. Spirit sends many gifts and material items, but we do not connect that they are from our loved ones. Many times I've done readings and a loved one will come through and say, "I hope you like the gold necklace I bought you last week." The client will look up at me dumbfounded and ask, "What are you talking about?" I explain that spirit can impress us to buy certain things. Some of the ways spirits intervene for us are, for example, when we receive a dozen roses out of the blue, or if we buy a house and have little problem closing the sale, or if we suddenly get a job that we wanted. Animals. Animals are often used by spirit. Many times spirit beings can influence a bird or small animal to come by to us to get our attention in some way. It's another sign of their nearness to us. A good friend of mine died in February. I went to New York, which was buried under 2 feet of snow, to visit her outdoor crypt. I had trouble locating it when suddenly a truck pulled up and a groundskeeper stepped out. "You're staring right at it," he said. I thanked him, and he went back to his truck and drove away. I thought it strange that he just happened to come by at that very moment. After I left, I looked up to her niche, and next to it, a bright blue jay perched itself on the branch of a tree. Mind you, it was very cold with snow. I didn't think it so unusual until later that afternoon when I visited her husband Jack at their home. I walked in the door, and Jack's first words were, "If you want anything of Connie's, please take it." I turned my head to the right, and there on the shelf was a glass bluebird, staring back at me. Meditations. It gives one solace to know that in a cold, disheartening world, where tragedy and intolerance appear to dominate, and the reasonable and rational self is nothing but a dream, a refuge exists where love stands supreme. It is a world of unlimited potential intermingled with divine bliss. This world of delight is available to everyone who chooses to open that door. Where is this place of contentment and love? This domain of peace is found in silence. It is the silence of being, just being. For it is in the golden silence of our own selves that the divine is found. When we center ourselves and listen to that still small voice within, we are tapping into the silence of being. And this self-knowingness can be utilized in every aspect of life to ripen and enrich every experience. So many people go through their daily lives in search of their purpose for living. They bemoan their fate and suffer so. If they would just take a simple moment to stop and listen to their inner voice, they would begin to open themselves up to a level of indefatigable understanding. But how do we get to this silence? How do we tap into our inner knowingness? How do we discern our inner voice? The answer to these questions, in the best way I know, is through meditation. Now, what is meditation? Simply, meditation is a focus of consciousness from one state of being to another. In essence, we turn off the outside, everyday world and tune into or become aware of our inside world. When we sit in silence and begin to focus our attention inwardly, the awareness of self is strengthened and the spiritual dimensions of the soul are revealed. When we meditate or concentrate our energies on our beingness, we return to wholeness, the oneness of who we are, our infinite self. In that oneness, we begin to discard the idea of duality that separates us from our God self. And this duality is based on the falsehood of negativity, fear, anxiety, illness, grief, and disappointment, all of which will become our reality when we are not in tune with our divine self. As we meditate, we utilize cosmic energies, and they in turn illuminate and energize the various spirit centers of the body. And this energy is focused primarily in our heart chakra, or center. And when we meditate, the light of the unconditional love is lit within us, and it continues to grow more and more with each meditation. We must remember that the heart center is the embodiment of the Christ consciousness, or the seat of the soul. The more we focus on this center, the more our feelings of unconditional love evolve, and in turn, the more we transform every aspect of our lives and influence everyone with whom we come in contact. All things start in the heart center. As we meditate, our psychic centers are heightened because the stream of the Christ consciousness that originates in the heart center flows through all the psychic centers or chakras of the body. We eventually tune into this energy or stream of light as it flows throughout the body. Forgiveness and regrets. Whenever someone passes, the living relatives and friends are often left with a lot of unspoken feelings and regrets. What if I could, and if only, seem to be the words that I hear most often. And those alive feel abandoned and incomplete, as though their hearts are broken and they can no longer continue living life. They would feel much better if they could share their feelings with their loved ones one more time. They don't know how to go on with their burdens and guilt. Rediscovering your power. So often in life it is our desire to be loved, and we tend to fall victim to our own making. We try so hard to be the best wife, mother, father, child, employer, lover, or friend. And because we believe it is what is expected in order to have the love of someone else, we compromise who we truly are. And for the most part, we do this on an unconscious level, and we're totally unaware of our behavior. After a while, our behavior becomes second nature, and days fall into years as we continually try to live up to their image of us. Eventually, we find ourselves depressed and unhappy about life and unfulfilled in our dreams. At this point, it is difficult to trace back to the why and how we feel this way. Not only have we given our power and a piece of ourselves to these people, but more important, we've not been true to who we are. We have left our centeredness and given away a part of our beautiful self-wholeness. Unfortunately, we can never be truly happy until we live our own lives. And so many people are miserable when their loved ones pass, and much of this pain is the result of compromise. Too often they have given away a part of who they are. They have compromised their individuality. They have not been true to themselves because of the need or desire to please the other. So when loved ones die, they are left with no sense of self-esteem because so much of their identities were tied to the deceased. All that is left is a sense of emptiness and loneliness. The following meditation is one you can use to regain that part of you that has been lost, taken, or given away. Use this meditation to bring back the creative power that is yours. Begin with preliminaries. To begin, envision yourself standing in front of a peaceful and serene lake. It is a gentle blue lake that reflects a myriad of magnificent colors of the landscape. Rich green, blue, yellow, and violet. You can smell the freshness of the stimulating country air. Two swans swim around the lake and add to the tranquility of the scene. The more you look at this lake, the more relaxed you become. You take a walk to the far side of the lake and see a stream flowing down a mountain into the lake. You climb up the mountain to locate the origin of this stream. When you reach the top of the mountain, you discover a beautiful cascading waterfall. You look up toward the sky and notice that there's no beginning to the waterfall. It seems to fall right out of the heavens. You remove your clothes and lay them on a nearby rock. You walk under the waterfall and feel the cool, pristine water caress your body. It is water, the likes of which you have never felt. It feels as if feathers are touching your body, and in an instant you feel totally cleansed. You look down at the stream below, and as if looking into a magic mirror, you see all the different circumstances in which you gave away your power. You see the times when you should have been true to yourself. You see how you did not love yourself enough, nor treat yourself with respect. As you watch these images, each one slowly floats down the mountain stream. As you continue to stand under the waterfall, you notice a beautiful light streaming through the falls. As this light touches you, you suddenly feel a rush of energy and a newfound sense of creativity. You begin to feel love running throughout your body. You feel love for yourself. For it is your love that you are finally getting in touch with. And as you continue to feel this love and joy, you look into the water, and the images you see are now quite different. You see yourself happy, doing activities you have always wanted to do but never gave yourself the time for. You see people applauding you for how wonderful and loving you are. You see the true you. Feel how much lighter you've become. Feel your strength and potential, once lost, return to you. All that self-assurance resides within you now. You are free of other people's domination. You've taken a wonderful journey to rediscover your true self. Enjoy it. You leave the waterfall and feel a whole new and wonderful being inside yourself. You are excited about your new self. You look at your clothes. They have been replaced by a beautiful spirit robe. You put on the robe as a reminder that you are invincible. You are truly God.